The ancient Rishis of India and of the Rigvedic times did not invent quantum physics. The ancient seers of Rigveda and ancient India did not invent the internet. All the speculations and things that we understand and know about our Rishis are not correct, specifically with respect to the scientific technologies and advancements that we see today. Then what is or what was the role of the Rishis in the ancient Rigvedas? What is the Rigveda? We in today's time very loosely use the words by saying, Hamare Vedas mein ye likha hai. It is written in our Vedas whenever we talk about anything that is getting invented in today's time. But do we really understand our ancient scriptures? Do we really understand Vedas? Do we know what Rigveda is? In this very powerful episode, with a former ISRO scientist who contributed to Chandrayaan-1, Mr. Jijith Nadumuri Ravi, we get into his book Rivers on Rigveda, in which very scientifically and meticulously and with all the evidences, he has cleared out the entire chronology of Rigveda. He has made everyone understand what was the Rigveda, what was the purpose of Rigveda, who were the people who were involved in those eras, what was the role of the kings, what was the role of the Rishis, and what were the roles of the Devas, or the higher level of consciousness, and not physical beings. This is a very powerful episode, a first of its kind episode in which we reveal the truths and the origins of Rigveda. We talk about how the Rgveda debunks the Aryan Invasion Theory, which basically propagates that the Aryans were Europeans, and because they were fair-skinned, they are a superior race, and that they entered the Indian subcontinent, bringing with themselves Vedas and Sanskrit. This book debunks that. This book also makes a very strong point for the out of India theory. Watch this episode. Listen to this episode to truly appreciate your history, to truly understand what the Rigvedas wanted us to understand and what they contained. No mumbo jumbo, no metaphysical talks, no aliens, but reality, the geographic and the historical significance of the sages and the kings and the higher levels of Devas of the Rigveda. Guys, my humble request to you is that if you're liking the kind of authors that we're bringing and the subjects we're talking about, please do subscribe to our channel. It really gives us a lot of motivation, and I think this is the only way in which we can grow and continue to get you such amazing authors and topics and subjects. Thank you. And enjoy this episode.
The fuel for Renaissance came from the Indian books on
Wow.
Veda, Upanishads, etc. The entire Europe was totally fascinated by the knowledge of India. Now they found 10 times more powerful, 10 times more valuable knowledge from India. And it became very clear that compared to Greece, India have 10 times more knowledge. And they were still discovering more knowledge. So there was a sense of, initial appreciation. Suddenly, for some countries like Germany, it led to the situation where they said, we are the owners of this. So they wanted to appropriate this entire knowledge that is there in India, saying that these are the knowledge coming from the Aryan race. And this Aryan race is German. Dwaraka itself means gateway. It was the gateway through which the wealth entered into the Indus Valley civilization, the trade wealth.
Wow.
And Dhalavira was the Dwaraka city, so sport city, which was collecting all the wealth. And this wealth was primarily reaching to the political center, that is Guru Rashtra. And it mentioned about 400 plus kings ruling in that area. So if you count the number of kings mentioned in the Rigveda, count the number of Indus Valley settlements currently we have on earth, it's more or less 400. So kings are also 400, settlements also 400. So they are perfectly matching. And you will be surprised, the biggest economy of Indus civilization is agriculture, which is exactly same as in the Rigveda.
Yeah.
So there is no mismatch between the attributes of the Indus Valley civilization and the Rigvedic civilization. Indian researchers claim that, like river Saraswati is a snow-filled river. So very clearly Rigveda shows that the river Sarasvati has reduced into a rain-fed river by the early Rigvedic period itself. So this is one important confusion in the minds of the researchers which I need to clarify.
Mr. Jijith, thank you so much for being a part of Discovery of an Author podcast and agreeing to be on our podcast. As I was telling you before the recording started, that I have been following your work. I am really a fan of the kind of work that you're doing and the research-oriented approach that you have towards our itihas and history and mythological things. It's absolutely brilliant. Your scientific temperament is what actually attracted me towards your work. And after being, I have read your book, which we're going to discuss, which is Rivers of Rigveda. And it is a phenomenal book. I was not aware of Rigveda. I was not aware of anything about Rigveda. I always used to find it very inaccessible. But after reading a book, which is a very heavy and a very scientific and a very scholarly book, but readable as well, which is a great thing, I was really surprised to understand Rigveda and the kind of mapping that you have done and the hierarchy and everything is just phenomenal. And I'm very happy that we're going to go deep dive into Rigveda and the rivers and the geography, because the chronology is always linked to Rāmāyaṇa and Mahābhārata as well. That's how they follow in a chronological order. So very interesting. So Mr. Jijith, first of all, thank you so much for accepting and being a part of our podcast.
Yeah. Look forward to a very fruitful podcast.
Yeah. Mr. Jijith, now, before we start, I'm very well aware of your credentials and what the work you're doing. I would still want you to please tell a bit about your work, what you're doing currently, what you have done, and everything that you would like people to know more about you. Please start, sir.
Yeah, so the Rivers of Rigveda is kind of a journey into the Rigvedic geography or the Rgvedic world, but it is structured in a manner such that we focus on each river, like the first occurrence of a river inside the Rigveda, the oldest mandalas of the Rigveda, and like that in a chronological sequence we are exploring the rivers one after the other. So that is how the book is structured. It has got a geographical journey inside it, and it starts with the oldest river towards the younger and younger rivers. And the beauty of this book is that because it as we explore the Rigvedic geography by looking at the oldest river to the youngest river, we are actually proving something, and that something is refutation of the Aryan Invasion Theory or Aryan Migration Theory, because we get a very clear westward gradient, like the migration starting from Ganga, Yamuna and Saraswati region. And then slowly in the later chronological period, it goes to the rivers of Punjab like Satluj and Bias, which are mentioned as Sududri and Vipash inside the Rigveda. And then slowly it moves to the further west rivers like Parushni and Asikni, which today we call it Ravi and Chenab. And then in the subsequent phases, it reaches the rivers like Jhalam, which is represented as Vipali, and then there is a river called Sarayu, not to be confused with the Uttar Pradesh Sarayu, but a western Sarayu, and then Sindhu River. And after that Sindhu River, you very interestingly, the last phase of your chronological journey, you see the rivers like Gomal and Gupha, that is Gomati and Gupha River, that is Gomal and Kabul River. So Kabul River is very famous, and it is known as one of the main rivers in Afghanistan. So we get it exactly, people don't know it, we get the Kabul River inside the Rigveda. And that time we understand that there is a migration point has reached eastern Afghanistan. So this was the kind of a very fascinating kind of journey which you can get once you have the Rigvedic mandalas arranged in a chronological sequence with the oldest first and then the youngest like that. And the oldest river, very interestingly, we get as Ganga. And these are very obvious for a very basic reading of the Rigveda. But the unfortunate fact is that for more than 50 years, many researchers into the Rigveda, mostly from the western side, they didn't make sense of it, or either ignored it, or they did some politics around it, so that these things didn't came out. So this is one of the interesting things I have expressed inside the book, The Rivers of Rigveda. And that is why the rivers are actually speaking this secret. So the rivers, Nadi, that rivers are giving a secret to you. And that secret is that Aryan Invasion Theory is wrong. And the opposite, that is out of India theory.
Out of India theory, OIT.
Correct one. like that. That is the beauty of this book. And this is a kind of a secret encoding, because many people claim a lot of things about Rigveda. And you are a man of scientific temper, so I don't want to talk about this. Many people say there is a speed of light in Rigveda, or some other very absurd claims. But this is a real thing encoded into the Rigveda, that it encodes the migration of the ancient people from the Ganga Saraswati region towards Punjab rivers, then Sindhu and the Afghan rivers.
Mr. Jijith, first of all, thank you for saying that. And I'll tell you why it is very important that you cleared that. You are absolutely right. Because we have not read the scriptures, or we have not read these texts. Nowadays, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a very clear example. We were earlier talking about quantum physics and Rgveda, right? So what is happening now? The problem that I see today is that Western science is expanding and they're just growing at a rapid pace. I recently read an article wherein they were able to freeze light. I am still not able to digest the fact that they were able to freeze light in a certain setup in an environment for certain minutes. When we discuss it within our ecosystem in India, I belong to the northern belt part of India. I am from Jaipur, Delhi, NCR, Punjab side. I discuss these things with my parents. I tell them, ki, Mom, do you know XYZ has happened, quantum physics, these things. You know what they say? Ki, beta, I'll say in Hindi, then I'll translate in English. Like, beta, ye sab to hamare Vedo mein likha hua hai. And I'm like, and what she's saying is all these, and they are there in our Vedas because they don't know. The problem is that all the scientific developments which are taking place, if we just keep on assuming that these things were there in Vedas, we will not progress. We are satisfied in the fact that, oh, we had done everything, wherein we had not. And that is the reason we are not able to progress. That is the reason we are not able to move ahead. It's the equivalent of saying that Sehwag was able to score 100 in one match, but the next 50 matches he got out for duck. But remember the time when he scored 100? Doesn't matter. Yes, we were rich in a lot of things. There were a lot of things that we get absolutely correct. We had a scientific temperament. I think in astronomy, we were really good. In algebra, in mathematics, we were exceptionally great. But thank you for saying that all these things that people associate with Rigveda, the speed of light and all these weapons is absurd. Because after reading a book, the only thing which I understood, what you are rightly saying, is the migration part of it. And today, sir, more than anything, people should be first of all concerned about their roots. We have been fed wrong information about the Aryan Invasion Theory for a very long time. We were taught that our Genesis, our language, Sanskrit is an Indo-European language. It came from the Iranians. And even a lot of Indian gods are from the Iranian belt. Krishna, when the Aryans, they call it, they don't even say Aryans, when the Aryans came, they brought with them the language Sanskrit, they brought with them Krishna, they brought with them the Vedic culture. And I used to always say, if they did bring it to our land, why do not I see any examples of such structures and everything abundantly found in that region? It's not as if they destroyed, they came to India, they started rebuilding, right? So you're absolutely right. And I'm so glad that you said it. And Mr. Jijith, before we move ahead, I want to ask a couple of things as well. You mentioned that, yes, there was some Western agenda. I mean, there must have been some Western strategy of demeaning or undermining our origins and our history. And that is why the Aryan Invasion Theory was very powerfully put forth. And a lot of Indian historians are to be blamed because they have been writing books since many years. I know Romila Thapar, I have read Romila Thapar when I was in 10th class because that was the only reference point for us. And I was absolutely convinced that we are alien. The Aryan Dravidian divide is something which I still cannot digest right now. Earlier, I was like, okay, there must have been an Aryan invasion. We must have pushed them back, the Dravidians. But that also has been refuted. So first question, Mr. Jijith, why do you think that Western agenda is there? I mean, I sometimes don't understand. Why would anybody would want to undermine a nation's civilization? I couldn't get an answer for that. So I just want to understand this first.
Yeah, actually, as I always say, I have to tell the truth that is slightly in between, because there was no, initially there was no intention to demean India. Because when the first time the Europeans figured out that certain words in Sanskritam, that is matching with certain words in Latin, for example, Greek, for example. So the most dominant theory of the Europeans was that this entire language originated in India. So the out of India theory was the oldest theory. Even the Europeans were also talking about it. And then what happened is that this all happened 100 years ago, 100 or 120 years ago in the very late 18th, late 19th century and early 20th century, etc. So you may be surprised that the out of India theory was the dominant theory at that time. But slowly, what happened is that certain kind of political things happened. One is that British was ruling India, and the British ruled India. They found it a little bit difficult to manage the Indians. When your dominant theory is that even including the language or the languages like English and other European languages came from India. So that time, no, they have a kind of the theory as well as the British rule in India. They cannot be justified because they are like mutually contradictory. So that is the time when they have started searching for some methodology, etc. And then we cannot 100% sure whether how much amount of the political motivation entered into the this linguistics. But some linguists started looking at the construction of certain words, and they found one thing that when you follow this methodological construction of the ancient root of many words that is found in Vedic Sanskritam and German, French, or Russian, or Greek, or Latin, that is not exactly converging into the Vedic Sanskritam. It is converging into some other language which is slightly offset from the Vedic Sanskritam. And that part is, I mean, it's not false. It is even true even today. But then they call that particular language as Proto-Indo-European language as the mother of all the languages, including Sanskritam and the other European languages. So up to that point, they were correct. And even now, even I don't refute the theory that the Proto-Indo-European is the oldest language. From there, the Vedic language is a kind of one of the child language of the Proto-Indo-European. Where they have they went wrong is in identifying the location of the Proto-Indo-European language. So they have actually their linguistic construction was 95% correct, because 5% we cannot say, because these are probabilistic and statistical based calculation. But 95% it's correct. But where they totally went wrong, when 100%, I would say 100% they went wrong is in locating the Proto-Indo-European language. And they have done some jugglery there. Maybe politics have entered into that. And the initial, their plan was, their point was that it is in Germany. So that is where the Nazism, everything started. And then based on so much of gymnastics, intellectual gymnastics, they say the geographical location of the Proto-Indo-European is Germany. And then onwards, this politics starts. So basically, the politics is primarily about the geographical location of the Proto-Indo-European. But many of the nationalists of India, they wrongly think that the politics is also there in the formulation of the Proto-Indo-European language. But that is false. That is why I am saying there is a middle ground here. They are right in terms of formulating the Proto-Indo-European language. But even today also in mathematical reconstruction, you can get that Vedic Sanskritam is a kind of a child language and not the actual parent. But 100% we can, with all the evidence, even including my books and my predecessor Srikant Talagiri's books, it is very clear that this geographical location of the Proto-Indo-European was within India. That is where they failed. And so you can say the geographical location of Proto-Indo-European is slightly politically motivated, starting with the German nationalism. And once the Germans started positioning it into Germany, and there are some other linguistic theories which slightly put in different locations, like South Russia and even Ukraine, like that. So this is going on. I mean, that kind of wrong models are continuing even today, even though they are very much weakened.
So, but why do you think that the Germans were imposing this thing? Because of their fascination with the Aryan race? Because they used to think that was a superior race? They wanted to push their agenda forward?
Yeah, the primary agenda was not related to India. The primary agenda was to see that the Germans were the most superior race. And they wanted, they themselves wanted to be considered as the pure Aryans.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit backdrop here, because even that may be good for the audience. because you see the Europeans were highly rating the knowledge in India, because in the 15th and 16th century, there is something called European Renaissance that occurred.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of which they have slightly moved from the dogmatic religion, that is the Christian religion, which was interfering with all the kind of politics, everything.
And they started in France, right? The genesis happened in France of the European Renaissance.
Yeah, everything happened in France, but it was all over the Europe.
Yeah.
And that is how the European nations become advanced in science, etc. because of that. Because they just freed themselves from the dogmatic Christian religion.
Yeah.
And for that, for freeing them from the dogmatic religion, they use the knowledge that is translated from the Indian texts, like Vedanta, etc. So,
and that we know for sure, that this is what they refer to. I mean, this is what they then read. Wow.
correct. Yes, yes. So it is, you can see the writings of Voltaire and similar kind of contemporaries during the Europe. Basically, the fuel for Renaissance came from the Indian books on
Wow.
Veda, Upanishads, etc. So the entire Europe, it will be like a kind of irony, but the entire Europe was totally fascinated by the knowledge of India. And earlier they were aware only about the knowledge from Greece, and they were thinking that Western civilization originated in the Greek knowledge. And initially, after freeing themselves from the Christian dogmatism, they were very much fascinated by the Greek knowledge, etc. But now they found 10 times more powerful, 10 times more valuable knowledge from India. And it became very clear that compared to Greece, India have 10 times more knowledge, and they were still discovering more knowledge. So there was a sense of, initial appreciation. Suddenly, for some countries like Germany, it led to the situation where they say, we are the owners of this. So they wanted to appropriate this entire knowledge that is there in India, saying that these are the knowledge coming from the Aryan race.
Got it.
And this Aryan race is German. That is, it originated in Germany. And whatever we see the Aryans in India, they are powerless, or they are inferior quality because they mixed up with the Dravidians.
And also dark skinned. I think one of the
They are dark skinned and they are of inferior quality because these noble Aryans from Germany, once they slowly migrated or invaded India, these Aryans, the noble white Aryans slowly become black in color because of the mixing with the Dravidians.
Yeah, locals. Yeah.
So a pure racist theory originated, and this is when the India started into the equation. So till that time, it was only German nationalism, and then now its a side effect resulted into a kind of vilification of Indian Aryans, or whatever they considered as Aryans, native Aryans, and they started mapping the Brahmins of India as like originating. Their ancestors originating in Germany or in Europe, but reaching India get corrupted because of the intermingling with the Dravidians. So this is a pure racist theory that has been planted, and even this Germany have not colonized any of the nations, but they intellectually they have colonized. They were an intellectual colonizer, and the Britishers were the actual colonizers of India. They took that particular theory because it suited well with their the plan of ruling India in a divide and rule kind of a methodology. So German intellectual ideas adopted by the British and planted into India. That is how we ended up into this situation.
That is very fascinating. I had no idea. I thought that this was the original British strategy of being ideologically and intellectually also controlling us, apart from being militarily controlling us. But this is very fascinating because I think at that time Germans were at a very superior leverage in terms of everything, in terms of military, in terms of innovation, in terms of science and technology as well.
They were considered as thinkers in linguistics, science and technology. Everywhere the Germans had a high superiority, and even Germans themselves considered they are better, far better than any other European nation.
Yes.
Even British or anybody.
But Mr. Jijith, the problem is that not a lot of people know about the concept of Aryan Invasion Theory. Okay, forget about out of India theory, which now people like you are trying to refute, and more or less we have kind of completely denounced the AIT. What I want you to also explain on, and for people to really digest the fact that because of this Aryan Invasion Theory, you really feel that we as a nation and a civilization have been at the back foot, I want to understand the impact, the psychological impact that such theories can have on a nation and what it really did to our country, because we always felt that we are meant to be colonized. So I really want you to explain this aspect as well, why it is so detrimental for a nation to also believe in such a thing.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, the entire thing came as a spin-off of the German nationalism. But once it got into the hands of the British, so they have used it as a kind of a very good tool to divide and rule India. Because basically it says that the North Indians are the outsiders, come from out of India, basically from Europe or Central Asia or whichever location they put. And the Dravidians are the native people of India. So this is the kind of basic idea that has been ingrained. And this has been taught and also discussed and thoroughly, so that every intellectual in India got subscribed to this idea. So automatically this created a division, a division that never existed in India before. Because we in our Puranas or in the Rāmāyaṇa or Mahābhārata, we don't see any kind of a conflict between the South Indians and the North Indians, any kind of, even in the Rigveda, because the entire geography of Rigveda is basically spanning from Ganga in the east to the Kabul River in the Afghanistan. So it's completely a North Indian affair.
Western side also, yeah.
There is no kind of a conflict. If there is a conflict, that is between East and West. Because in the Rigveda, basically, you have a kind of a conflict you can see in some of the suttas, like the sutta number 18 in the 7th mandala, that is explaining Dasharajana battle. So you have certain leaders who are called Kanavas, who are traced, their ancestry leads to the Proto-Iranians and some Iranian. So basically, some Proto-Iranians had a conflict with the rulers like Sudas, who are ruling in Haryana, etc. So there is a conflict. If at all there is in Rigveda, it was between the eastern region and the western region. And towards the 10th mandala, you can see some Dravidian names like Irimbita and Sirimbita, like that. Some names are there, and it is well understood as Rgvedic Rishis who are Dravidian speakers. So basically, these Rishis were inducted into Gotras like Kanva Gotra and Bharadwaja Gotra.
Yeah.
So Southerners are basically integrated into the Rigvedic fold, and there was no kind of a conflict. So of course, there was some Dravidian presence in the regions like Gujarat and Sindh, that is in Pakistan today. In the southern part of the Indus Valley civilization, there was some Dravidian presence, and the Rishi Munis of Dravidian names you can see in the Rigveda. But that is, rather than conflict, what we are seeing is integration. So they are inducted into the Gotras, Rishi Gotras like Kanwa and Bharadwaja. This is the evidence that we get from Rigveda. And if you go to Mahābhārata or Rāmāyaṇa also, we don't see any kind of north to south conflict. Yeah, of course, some people will say Ravana is a Dravidian and Rama is an Aryan. But you look at, anyway, that is refuted in my this second book, Geography of Rāmāyaṇa. But I will not dwell now, but just look at the colors. Rama is considered as a dark-skinned individual, and Ravana, many descriptions consider him as a very fair and handsome person. So even if you think that the Ravana is a South Indian king, which he is not, which is my research. But even for the argument's sake, if you think Ravana is a South Indian king, he is a fair-skinned, handsome person.
Yeah.
And Rama is a dark-skinned person. So
same goes for Krishna. Krishna, the word, it means the black one. So
Krishna is also a black person. And of course, Balarama, his brother himself is white. So we don't care about the color. Because in the same family, you have dark and white. We have Gauri. Gauri means fair skin. And we have Kali, means dark skin. So we have brothers and sisters who are dark and white, fair. And we don't have any such concept of racism based on color. And so now I will tell about the impact. Now, see, as I mentioned, so there is when you say that the North Indians are like outsiders, automatically it uprooted the North Indians already. Even though it say that the North Indians were the winners, they were superior, etc., but automatically make them disconnect them from the land because they are outsiders. And then the Dravidians, they are native people, but they are given a kind of a sentiment that they are defeated. So automatically this will plant the resentments, and then they feel like they want to take a revenge. So if you put in this narrative, and that is what we are seeing in the political parties like DMK or ADMK or any party in the Tamil Nadu, they have a sense of wronged, the sense of being wronged. and they are continuously try to avenge that imaginary kind of wrong thing that the North Indians have done to him, to them. And this has led to very kind of toxic politics in India, and it's still continuing, and we are still bearing the kind of negative impact of these politics.
The language barrier is one of them. You see the war that happens just on the base of language. In India, you know, Hindi versus Tamil versus Telugu versus Maharashtrian versus whatever. It is absolutely, and it is a byproduct of having this racial discrimination, misinformation that was spread because of Aryan Invasion Theory. So definitely we'll come to that. Mr. Jijith, now let's start from the basics now. Because we have touched on a very, very, very great topic, and our discussion would be totally scientific because that is your forte and that is what you represent. And I absolutely want to be 100% scientific. For anyone who really does not know what is Rigveda, I first want you to answer the question, what is Rigveda? What basically is Rigveda? Who wrote it? Because there are a lot of misinformation about that part also. What does it contain and what is the significance of Rigveda? So what is Rigveda? What is this text? What would I call it? Would I call it a historical text? Would I call it a religious text? Would I call it a mythological text?
So it's a very good question. So the Rigveda, the name itself, it's indicate that it is collection of Rig. Rig is actually a term used in the ancient period, which in the Aitihasic period we call it sloka. Sloka means two couplets. Now, two lines of poetry is called a sloka. So that is the word sloka is actually a post-Rigvedic term, and in the ancient period of the Rigvedic period, that is called Rig, and that Rigveda is basically a collection of Rig, or a collection of verses. In English we call it verses. So they are slokas basically. And what are this collection of Rigs? So basically, these are couplets, and these are basically elements of a poetry. And at the lowest level, you have Rig or verses, and maybe some 10, 15 to not 10, 15 to some 25, sometimes even 45 verses combined together form a sukta. Sukta is basically ukta, that is a good, it's a good kind of benediction. In English, we can simply call it as benediction, or good word spoken. So if you translate sukta means good word spoken. So what is this good word spoken? They are spoken about the gods, the Devatas. So there are the Rigveda mentioned many Devatas. So among them, the Indra is the most prominent of the Devatas. So if you compare I have a frequency table inside my book on the number of times different Devatas are mentioned in the Veda. In that, Indra stands out as a number one, and the number of times Indra is mentioned is much higher than the second, that is Agni.
Yeah.
And Indra and Agni are mentioned much higher than any other Devatas, including Vishnu and Rudra. So that is the structure of the Rigveda. So primarily it is about the Devatas, and the suktas are actually created. Sukta in English we call hymn, the sukta or poetry. So the suktas are basically recited for the praise of the Devatas. So that is the fundamental attribute of the Rigveda. But then how do we study history and geography in it? Because while they are praising the Devatas, because that is the primary objective of the Rigvedic suktas.
And they were praising the Devatas for a transaction, for something in return for the kings, maybe, right? Something like that.
I'll come to the three elements.
Yeah.
So primarily they are praising the Devatas, and that is how the sukta collection. So there are 1028 suktas in total, and around 10,555 rig or verses. So that is the entire size and structure of the Rigveda, and this is distributed into 10 mandalas. Mandalas means it's like a book. Like in the Mahābhārata you have Parva, in the Rāmāyaṇa you have Kandas, in the Rgveda you have 10 mandalas. Of course, there are different other classifications which we don't go into detail, but it is mentioned in my books. But the most popular classification is 10 mandala classification, 1028 suktas and 10,555 rigs. So this is in total of the Rigveda, of which I said the Devatas are the primary. But then there are others, like there are kings. There are certain kings mentioned in the Rigveda. So these suktas are basically recited by the Rishi Munis, who are called the composers or the poet. So today when I say Rigvedic poet, people sometimes are not very happy. You know, they say no, they are not just poet. They are basically the Rishis who are getting, you know, these Wi-Fi signals from the other side of the universe, and they capture that. And so, in a way, in a way, it is correct, but it's not exactly, because the Rishis are praising not only the Devatas, but they are also they are actually affiliated to the kings, Rajas, who are sometimes few of the kings are called Samrat, but 99% of them are called Raja, that is, they are kings, and some chiefs also. So all the suktas are recited in praise of the Devata to help or to support the pattern kings who are sustaining these Rishis. So it is an ecosystem in which you have, or if considered as a triangle, you have the Devata as one of the corner of that triangle, and you have the kings or the patterns as another point of that triangle, and then you have the Rishis, the composers, as another side of the triangle. So these three entities transact each other. So Rishis praise the Devatas for getting some favors which are actually being done in favor of the king. The king need to fight a battle, and he need to win that battle. Then one of the composer Rishi who is affiliated with the king, he will praise Indra, for example. So Indra will give a victory in battle. So otherwise, certain kings they don't have any reign in their kingdom. For example, Shantanu is mentioned in the 10th mandal of the Rigveda, and his kingdom was not having any reigns. Then Devapi is mentioned as a priest of Shantanu, but of course he is also the brother of Shantanu as per Mahābhārata. So Devapi praises Indra, and then the rain comes in the Shantanu's kingdom. So there are certain material requirement, material wishes or objectives. For that, the king comes and approaches the Rishi, and the Rishi prays to the god, and then as a result of the praise, they get some benefits, like whether it is a rain in a drought-hit country, or victory in battle, or any other such favors to the king. So this is the basic premise of the Rigveda, the triple transaction. And as a result of that, the king will give a lot of donations and gifts to the Rishis, that is called Dana. And as a result of Dana, that is donation, the Rishi will praise the king as well. So Rigvedic suktas will contain 90% the praise of the Devatas, but 10% it is praising the Rajas. So it is called Danastuti. And in the Danastuti, we know that the Rishis take donations in the form of chariots, horses, cows, or even maidens. Maidens are given as gifts. So this is the kind of transaction that we see in the Rigveda, and this is what we actually see when you look into the Rigveda in the verse by verse. Whereas the kind of romantic ideas which is floating around in the tradition is totally different. Of course, after even if you look at even during the period of the last even Yajurveda itself, some information which is there in the Rigveda got confused. For example, the original king who fought in the Dasharatha battle, Sudas, becomes some other king in the later Veda. So even during the later part of the Vedic tradition itself, something got forgotten. So imagine after the Vedic period comes of course the Brahmanas, some contemporaneous with the Vedic Samhita period. So Brahmanas, then next wave is the Aranyaka wave. Aranyaka means a little more philosophical. Brahmanas are primarily about rituals, and of course some amount of philosophy. Then comes Aranyakas, and after Aranyaka, the pure philosophy, the Upanishads. So up to that point of time, some principles of the Vedas were preserved, because the entire wisdom of the Vedas are preserved in the Upanishads. But then the period of Itihasas, and then the Puranic period, and then the rule of Mauryans, and then Sungas and Guptas. So that time, entire idea about Rigveda got completely, I don't say the word distorted, but transformed. And then the Rigveda, of course, it was originally itself is a song of praise of the Devatas. So it has got a religious significance. But now, when it is the Gupta period, it becomes, people forgot about what is the content of it, and they were just memorizing it without very much delving any amount of detail, like focus on the understanding the meaning or the context of it. And we have passed through this phase for the last 2000 years. And it is only in 21st century, or maybe the late part of 20th century, the people have started a fresh relook into the Rigveda, and they understand what it really was about in the period it was authored. So today, if you ask a layman or even a traditional scholar of the Rigveda, they will basically talk about what the Guptas were having the idea about Rigveda, basically. So it is a kind of a liturgic text which is meant for recitation during rituals. So they will recite it during an Adiratram or so earlier there was Ashwamedha or there was Rajasuya. So nowadays not there. The only yajna which is happening is Adiratram and similar Soma yajnas. So they will recite it. There are even people who are capable of reciting Rigveda in the reverse. So they are very experts in reciting the Rigveda, even in a complex manner like reverse recital, etc. But they are very less interested in understanding the meaning of it. The context is lost.
So basically, for example, so as you rightly said, there's a triangle. So there are three things or three players or key protagonists in the Rigveda. One the kings, one the Rishis, and the Devatas. So the Rishis kings used to come to the Rishis for something in return, that I want to win this battle. Could you pray for me? And the Rishi then used to heap praises on the particular Devta or the Deva to get that result. And if that used to happen, then the king used to reward the Rishis. The modern day yagna, like I'm also from a Hindu family, we do a lot of yagnas sometimes. Arya Samajis do a lot of yagna. So all these havans and yagnas, the Sanskrit mantras and everything that even the Pandits of today's time are reciting, can we date them to the Rigvedas? The origins are from the Rigvedas. Is it something similar that used to happen back then only?
Yeah, that is something positive about Rigveda, which even our ideological opponent, the Aryan Invasion theorists also agree. Like Michael Witzel agree that the Rigvedic recitation that is happening in 21st century is an exact tape recorder recital of the Rigveda, which has been composed by the ancient Rishis themselves during their period of contemporariness. So they have done the recitation and the memorization to the perfection. And for that, the Rishis also, that is one probably the Rishis who really wanted to preserve the Rgveda actually have made that planted that idea that it has to be recited from generation to generation. And this is also why there are certain resentments in the lower section of the Hindu society that once they are not allowed to recite the Rigveda, they were not allowed to be present even when the Rigveda was recited. These are all true, but there is some amount of innocence into that because they don't want the recitation to get corrupted. Because since somebody hears it without any proper shiksha, the shiksha is the correct word here, the pronunciation, then they will pronounce it wrongly, and within few generations, you will lose the correct pronunciation. So this is the reason why this is a very closely guarded, the Rigveda and other four Vedas, all the three Vedas were very closely guarded. Their recitation was done in closed quarters and passed on from family to family. Or of course, later on, it's resulted into maybe kind of something like an apartheid and all, but original intention was very positive. And this is one thing about Rigveda, that it is preserved to ditto without even an inch of or even a single vowel is not changed. So that way, it has been preserved from the earliest point it was composed till today.
But Mr. Jijith, one question that I always wanted to ask, and let's see if we can dissect this thing as well. I think it's very important. If I see Rigveda or try to understand and read Rigveda from an eye of a skeptic or from an eye of a Western scholar or a Western scientist, if I stumble upon this thing for the first time and I see that clearly people are wanting some transactions with deities or entities which are not of this world. Devatas could be called as entities which are not of this world, which my physical eyes cannot see. Wouldn't the skeptic or a scholar first want to wrap his or her head around how did you even first come to the conclusion that there are such devas which exist? That is one. Second, how did you know what to say to get something in return? And three, how do you validate that that thing was done?
This is like once you answer the question, we enter the realm of the religion, which of course my book is not focused on that. But since you asked the question and it is very intriguing, I can answer. So see, basically the identity of Devatas, there are a lot of speculation. So some people call them are aliens, etc., which I don't really agree with.
Yeah, neither do I.
Yeah, so basically the Devatas are kind of aspects of the consciousness, and that is exactly how the subsequent texts are mentioning. Like even in the last part of the Rigveda, starting with Purusha Sukta and all, we have a very clear explanation about who are the Devatas. So they are basically a single consciousness. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. So it is the same consciousness, and most of the focus on the consciousness came in the distilled version of the Vedas, that is the Upanishads. So in the Upanishads, you get the complete understanding of what was the original insight of the Rigveda or in the other Vedas. So in the Upanishads, once you get the conclusion of some of the inquiries that the Rigveda started, like Nasadiya Sukta, for example, it's an inquiry. It's like a science where basically without any dogmatism, like you don't have any preconceived notion, you start asking questions. And that is how that is basically the fundamental attribute of science. And that happened in the Nasadiya Sukta of the Rigveda. So the inquiry started. So you have Nasadiya Sukta, and then which is actually conceptualizing the universe itself, how it started, who created it, all the kinds. And then the Hiranyagarbha Sukta expands on it. And you have Purusha Sukta, which gives further expansion and some sociological dimension to the concept of cosmology. So once these inquiries get answered slowly in the Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and finally the complete answer you get in the Upanishads. So in the Upanishads, it says that there is a single reality. But that single reality is without any attributes. No, it's nirguna, and it is without any form. Nirakara. But when you basically you start interacting with this reality, this reality or this particular supreme consciousness converse or communicate to you in form, in a particular form and in a particular attribute. So you get a form. That is, you get the consciousness assumes a form, and the consciousness assumes some qualities. So, for example, Indra is basically a god who will be pleased by whatever offerings you give to him, and he is more or less like sometimes he will look like a naughty child. You imagine Krishna, for example, who takes butter and lot of butter, and then after that having satisfied, he is pleased. So similarly, Indra takes huge amount of soma, and then after fully satisfied with soma, he started giving you benefits, etc. So different devatas in the Rigveda are basically attributes of that supreme consciousness. And maybe in 21st century, you may be considering it as like superstitious or, but in that pristine world of which I considered chronologically in the 4000 to 3000 BC, or even of course Rigveda continued up to 2900 BC, where it became more complex. But in the ancient world, it is kind of make a lot of sense, because you first of all discovered the supreme consciousness as the fundamental attribute of the reality, and started interacting with that reality. And this reality has assumed different forms and interacted with you. It's more or less like your naughty Krishna, like Indra is interacting with the people. Sometimes he is angry, sometimes he is pleased, sometimes he expresses his views that I should get all the soma, but you should not give soma to Marut. So such complaints you can see. The soma, I need all the soma I should get, but no, Marut should not get soma. And Ashwin should not get soma. And then there are certain Rishi Munis coming and interacting with Indra, saying, no, we should give a little bit soma to Marut or to Ashwin.
Yeah.
So, and then this Marut are not enemies; they are friends of Indra. So it's like a friendly play. So you can see all these things in the Rigveda, and I will consider that this is all divine play that is being seen. Of course, people are very familiar with the divine play of Krishna and all, but these are like the Rigvedic gods having some divine play, and I have understood these divine forms, Indra and Agni. So these are all different aspects of the supreme consciousness.
Yeah.
And as a scientist, I can very well clearly say that modern science is coming to the same conclusion about having a supreme consciousness which is independent of the physical world. That is what in the quantum physics we say that when an observer observes something, the whatever observed phenomena can change. So that time science has already admitted that there is something called consciousness.
Yeah, and they're doing a lot of research, and to know that in such ancient times, we understood, we accepted, we validated, and created some kind of process to interact with that consciousness or the levels of consciousness. Because I also believe, because in the works of Sri Aurobindo also he has mentioned very clearly, consciousness is a faculty which can take a form in form of any matter. If it wants, it can convert into matter, it can come into a form that depends on the purpose and the evolution in the state. So absolutely right. And that is very beautifully, because Mr. Jijith, in my next question was related to this thing, because there was this quote in the book which I mentioned. Somewhere it has written, like in the days of yore, even today, the Rigvedic mantras are capable of expanding and ascending our consciousness. That is what intrigued me. That is what fascinated me. So I wanted to know the relationship between mantras and expanding and ascending the consciousness. I find it very fascinating. I want to understand the link. I want to understand the formula. What is this?
So this is actually the conclusion of whatever I just said.
Yes, yes.
Because the Devatas, when you correctly understand, they are like different aspects of the consciousness. So we are unable to comprehend the supreme consciousness, which is the Nirguna and Nirakara. So we will basically interact with that consciousness in a little bit bits and pieces in the form of form and with the attributes, with emotions, etc. So that is where the mantras are basically to please that different aspects of the consciousness in the form of Indra or Agni and definitely I didn't answer that question. So in the ancient world, this actually worked. So when Rishis started praying to Indra for rain did come. That is why that really happened. That is why these hymns are preserved and memorized even today. So I don't have any doubt about whether these people prayed and whether they get answer. The result is that it did provide them answers. It generate them results like victory in battles, rains, or some other benefits they did get it. So that is why these particular suktas are preserved even today. And basic value that you get today when you recite the Rigvedic suktas is that one is you can have a kind of experience of yourself. That is when you recite these suktas, there are many such studies because anyway I will talk in terms of a dispassionate scientist now. Many such studies have done wherein they see there is change in the consciousness. I mean, when I say change in the consciousness, I say change in the brain activity.
Brilliant.
If you have a chaotic kind of a mindset in your brain mapping, you have a chaotic kind of a mind brain waves. Once you recite a sukta, then automatically there is a coherence that can be seen.
Beautiful.
And this is not that we are saying it. So, for example, this is the reason why in Germany, of course, this is the same Germany which started to appropriate. So they are now teaching, of course, not just Rigveda, but Sanskrit suktas. A lot of them in Rgvedic suktas in the schools, and they have 100% repeated evidence that when these children recite the Sanskrit suktas and slokas, their brain activity is improving 10 times or even at least 2 times. It's people dependent. Some people it is improving some 50%. For some people, 2 times improvement, and there are cases of 10 times improvement, etc. People with autism, etc., getting proper coherence and coordination. All these things are happening, and these are studies. In fact, Indians are studying less about it, but Europeans, Germans, and the Britishers, they are studying a lot about it.
Germany has the highest number of Sanskrit studies opening up in their colleges and universities. And what is fascinating, Mr. Jijith, is that spirituality can show you what is possible, and then science tries to validate that. That dance is so beautiful. Mr. Jijith, now, I want to ask another question. We can go a bit more detail into it. Very important. And you can say the names. We want names. Who were the Rigvedic Rishis? And what was their, though you have explained that, and what was their role in composing the hymns? And so you just named certain Rishis, and could you also shed light on the Devatas? Some of the Devatas, that who they were, what was the name of the Devatas? If you can associate an attribute with a specific Devata also, we will be able to understand very mathematically that these were the Rishis. It's possible that some of the name of the Rishis people might able to resonate. Oh, I know this name. So the Rishis, the Devatas and their attributes, and more or less a connection. What I am also interested to understand is how did they come to know about the mantras? As you said, it was not through a Wi-Fi or something, but something similar. I want to know what is something similar. Before that, let's take them up individually. Who are the Devatas, some of their name and attributes, and who are the Rishis? And then
So the Rishis, if you look at the information about the Rishis in the Rigveda, you see some of the Rishis are mentioned in past tense. That is, they were existing before the composition of the Rigveda.
Pre-Vedic era. So that is the pre-Vedic era, right?
Pre-Rigvedic period, what we call pre-Rigvedic period. So this will be something like older than 3,300 BC or 4,000 BC. So we are talking about
6,000 years
like
old.
7,000 BC or 6,000 BC or that kind of ancient period when then agriculture just started and people started settling in the farm. There's something called farming settlements. And then people have a lot of time and that is where the philosophy was born. So till the time you are hungry and fighting for food as a hunter-gatherer, you don't actually find any time for contemplating and developing a philosophy, etc.
So true. So true. Brilliant.
So somewhere around 8000 BC, as the oldest, we get started farming settlements, etc. So there were some Rishi Munis who are living in the Sarasvati region, and it could be the southern part of the Sarasvati where it drains into the Rann of Kutch, or it could be the northern part of the Sarasvati where in the Haryana, etc. So one part is clear; they were very close to or along the banks of the river Sarasvati. So there are Bhrigus, Bhrigu, many people will be knowing, and then I mean these are not personal names, but these are family names. So you don't consider Bhrigu means there is a certain individual named Bhrigu, but
Clan, in a way.
clan of a family of Rishis called Bhrigus with Angirasas. And these are the two oldest Rishis mentioned in the Rigvedas, living earlier than the composition period of the Rigveda, pre-Rigvedic Rishis. And then you have certain Rishis who are in the early Rigvedic period, like there is a Bharadwaja who is basically descended from the Angirasa lineage, the Bharadwaja family of the Rishis. So they are basically we can see they are connected to the kings like Devatas, some of the oldest Bharata king Devatas. So their priests were Bharadwaja. So even here also I have to use plural because there were multiple Bharadwaja Rishis, and maybe one particular Bharadwaja was the priest of one particular king called Devatas. Devatas is an individual name. So like that. And then you have Vishwamitra. Again, we normally see the name Vishwamitra in singular, but in the Rigveda, basically it's a plural where there are multiple Vishwamitras. So one of the particular Vishwamitra was advisor to Sudas, who is a descendant of the king Devatas. And then there is Vasishta. Again, it has to be understood as plural. And the particular Vasishta Rishi of the 7th Mandala was contemporary to this Vishwamitra of 3rd Mandala, and both of them were advisors to King Sudas. And you have Gautama, who become very active in the 4th Mandala, chronologically later than the 7th. And he is basically connected with some of the descendant of the King Sudas, like Sahadeva. And then there is a Rijrashva, another Rishi who is connected to Somaka, who is a descendant of Sahadeva. So there is a lineage of kings, and there are poets or composer Rishis who are connected to. And then you have in the last 10th Mandala, which is the youngest Mandala of the Rigveda, Shantanu is there, and his brother Devati is more or less playing the role of a Rishi and helping Shantanu to rule his kingdom. And in between, there are many Rishi Munis. Agastya is there, then Kashyapa is there. So these today we understand these Rishi Munis are Gotras, and that is exactly how in the Rigveda they are Gotras basically. So Kashyapa may not be an individual Kashyapa, but there are many Kashyapas. Atri is there in the 5th Mandala, so there are many Atri Munis, Atreya lineage, and then there are the Gautamas and Bharadwajas like that. And there's a Gritsamada lineage, which is a kind of a very strange conversions. So from the Angirasa lineage, Rishi got converted into the Bhrigu lineage. So they are the Gritsamadas lineage. So there is such kind of thing. So it's not always a father-son relationship.
Makes sense.
People can be inducted into a lineage. I also mentioned in the 10th Mandala, two Dravidian Rishis, Irimbada and Sirimbada were converted or adopted into the Kanva family and the Bharadwaja family, etc. So these are not bloodlines basically. So they are basically the Rishi Muni's guild basically. So a Gotra is a guild basically, a kind of a family in which it's not always hereditary, but people can be inducted from another Gotra. So this is the Rishis. Now I'll talk a little bit about the Devatas. So of course the most prominent Devata is in the Rgveda is Indra, and he is basically described as a naughty child, very much similar to Sri Krishna. There is a very beautiful sutta in the Rigveda which is talking about the birth of Indra, where he is and this is maybe it's very much shocking to the Puranic people, because Indra is mentioned indirectly as the child of Twashtar, who is the architect. So again, there is a connection with the Indus Valley here, because Indus Valley civilization, the architects are very famous. So he is a son of an architect. Indra is a son of an architect, and he was an illegitimate child.
Fascinating.
His mother is the one who protects him, because father doesn't care about him, and he gets into the house of his father, that is Twashtar, and drinks huge amount of soma. And then there are certain conversation between Indra and his mother. And the identity of Indra's mother is not revealed. But you can indirectly, very vaguely connect that mother to be Aditi, etc. But there is no direct connections mentioned. But in the Puranas, of course, Aditi is the mother of Indra. But in the Rigveda, that connection is not very directly implied. So, of course, in the Puranas, we say Kashyapa is the husband of Aditi. But if we follow Rigveda, then Twashtar should be the husband of Aditi. But of course, Indra is not a proper son of Twashtar, but an illegitimate child. So this is very unknown to many people. But then slowly Indra became a leader of the Devatas, and then his primary kind of activity was fighting Vritra. And the only Devata who supported Indra was Vishnu. And that is how Vishnu and Indra become very connected. And you can see in the Puranas, whenever any problem happens, Indra goes to Vishnu. So this kind
is it the same Vishnu that we know today of, which is mentioned in the Puranas? The Vishnu of the Puranas is the Vishnu of the
elaborated on the Vishnu. But in the Rigveda, Indra's assistant is Vishnu basically. So Vishnu is given the status of Upendra. So he is basically assistant of Indra, but of course he is very powerful. And sometimes Indra gets assistant from his assistant. So basically that is the kind of equation.
Yeah.
And with the help of Vishnu, Indra has fought Vritra, and Vritra is defeated. And Vritra is basically understood as frost, because that is obvious from the narrative, that there is certain rivers which are locked up by Vritra. And when Indra's action happened, basically it's like sun rays or some lightning, because this ice get heated up and it melts, and then the water started flowing. So this is basically, many people have considered this as connected to the Himalayan rivers melting. And of course, Indra's activities are mentioned in Parushni river, that is the Ravi river, which is a Himalayan river basically. Very closely connected with Parushni, and then Vidasta, Asikni. These are the Jalam, Chenab and Ravi rivers. So Indra is very famously bathing in the Ravi river, that is Parushni river, which was his favorite river. But he is credited with saving, freeing all the rivers of the Rigveda from the clutches of frost. Frost, otherwise represented as Vritra. So Vritra is in a different manner. If you understand Vritra, it is a Himalayan snow, Himalayan glaciers. So the Himalayan glaciers melt and the rivers are freed, and then they flow into the plains. And that is why the people of the plain, that is the Rishi Munis, always praise Indra as the person who freed the rivers. And that is the story about Vritra. And similarly, the second most famous popular Devata is Agni. And for everything, Agni is invoked. And he is the messenger of the gods, because anything which is you are giving a food to gods, you have to submit it to Agni. So Agni will take it, and that food Agni consume. And after that, through Agni, it reaches the Devatas. That was the kind of concept, understanding that was existing in that period.
But why is Indra so famous? Why? Because most of the hymns and mantras were dedicated to Indra. Was Indra very actively somebody who used to give the boons? Was he very much involved in the entire ecosystem? So why the popularity of Indra was so prominent? And how did it die up leading up to the Puranic era? And most of these deities, they are nowhere mentioned in the Puranic era. In the Puranic era, you see the rise of Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, Devi, Ganesh, Kartikeya, and all pantheons, which is not very prominent. So why Indra was a very prominent god of Rigvedic, and how did eventually all these deities died up leading up to the Puranic era and the rise of Trinity?
Right. So, of course, Indra is very popular because the most number of suktas, if you count it totally, that is the Indra comes with the number one position. But then why part of it? One is that every region gets a patron god. So the
Kul Devta, you are saying Kul Devta? Is this the same concept?
Yeah, something like
Kul Devi or Kul Devta, yeah.
Yeah. So of course the Bharatas have a patron goddess called Bharati, which can be very rightly considered as the ancient form of Bharat Mata.
Bharat, yeah.
So, and the patron god of the Bharatas was Indra. So Bharata's primary god who they prayed, that was Indra, and the primary goddess was Bharati. And of course, there are other goddesses like Ila and Saraswati. So Ila is their grandmother, great grandmother. The Bharata kings were all descended from Ila. And the Saraswati is basically the goddess, the deification of the primary lifeline, that is river Saraswati as a goddess. And this particular Saraswati as a goddess, they're right in the Rigveda. So it's not a transformation that happened in the Puranas. Right in the Rigveda, Saraswati is also a goddess. And Yulai become a goddess, and Bharati is another goddess. So three goddesses are very much highly revered in the Rigveda, called Apri Suktas, very important sukta in the Rigveda. And Indra basically is the deity. He was basically the local deity of a monsoon-based climatic condition of the northwest India. Indra's attribution connection with the rains and rivers are already established within Rgveda itself, even though the Airavada concept is not there. Indra mostly rides a chariot. That how Indra travels, and it is driven by a horse. But the term used is Hari. So Hari basically, some translators translate the Hari as horse. Even I have used that translation. But now in 2025, when I relook it, the Hari could also means any animal who is brown in color. So it need not be always a horse, but it can be a bull who is a brownish color bull. So Hari, so anyway, whatever it may be, whether it is horse or a bull, the chariot, he traveled in chariot. So in the Puranas, how the slowly, because the Indra is basically transformed into a rain god towards the end of the Rigvedic period. Earlier, he was a river god, basically the rescuer of the rivers from the snow. And later on, he became a rain god. Once it's rain god, then it is associated with the rain clouds. So rain clouds, the Puranic people imagined as a big white elephant. That is the concept. That is how the white elephant Airavada comes into picture.
Yeah.
And you already have the Indra's fair. Even though Indra is the rescuer of all the rivers in the Rigveda, he is very much fond of the Parushni river. And Parushni river's later name in the Mahābhārata is Iravati.
Iravati, yeah.
So Indra is bathing in the river Parushni, automatically become Indra riding Iravati river. So that again become Indra riding Airavata. So this is also another transformation.
Interesting.
And now you ask me how this Indra's popularity got subdued by the Puranic. So there is a 1,000-year gap. So for example, in my chronology, Rigveda ends in 1900 BC. And from 1900 BC to around 1,000 years elapsed. And then you have 900 BC onwards, the basic some structures of the Puranas. Of course, there are certain older concepts. Purana Samhita, which is now lost. Purana Samhita could be contemporary to Veda Vyasa. So that is why Veda Vyasa is credited with the authorship of Purana. But whatever Purana that we get to read, my estimate is that its conceptualization happened around 900 BC onwards. And slowly it matured in the 1,000 years. And even 4th century CE, the Gupta era end. Till that time, Puranas were in active edit period. And then it went to passive edit, and till the time we get the manuscript in 11th century CE, etc. So all the oldest manuscripts we get is from 11th century to 15th century CE. So that is how the Puranas are ordered. So there is a gap of 1,000 years from the thought process of Rigveda towards the thought process that is led into the Puranic conceptualization. So whatever we are seeing as the change in religion is because of the gap of 1,000 years.
Makes sense.
It is even there is a concept. This is also the basis of the Kali Yuga concept. There was a silence of 1,000 years. That is after the Kurukshetra war that happened in the 1793 BC in my calculation. Slightly to 200 years later to the end of Rigveda, you have the Kurukshetra war. And after Kurukshetra war, you have kings like Parikshit ruled and Janamejaya ruled. And after that, two kings, Janamajaya's two descendants, Shatanika and Ashwamedha, are mentioned in a single verse in the Mahābhārata. And then it says that the entire country or the entire region relapsed into Kali Yuga or Dark Age. So that Dark Age is actually, even though we consider it as present tense, but it is actually in our past. And that was 1,000 years of Dark Age. Because in the Dark Age, you have the descendants of this Parikshit, this Ashwamedha Datta. After Ashwamedha Datta, there was so many kings like Asima Chakra, Ashima Krishna, and Nichakra, etc. So that time was not very famous. I mean, we only get the name of the people, but there is no activity mentioned about the kings who ruled in that period. This was the Dark Age, and that is a Kali Yuga, historical Kali Yuga that existed. So during the time, maybe something like an invasion happened. So I have retrospective analyzed, and it is some Cambodia invasion that has happened in that period, like in around 1500 BC, which the people, genetic theorists called it Aryan Invasion Theory, etc. But it's basically Cambodia invasion. Kambojas and Rishigas invaded into the plains, Gangatic plain, and defeated all the kingdoms. So this Kuru kingdom, Panjala kingdom, all the kingdom become very powerless. And the Rishi Munis were living in the forest. And they tried to preserve the text, etc. So that such 1,000 years elapsed, and then they reconstituted everything. So then, because of the 1,000 years of gap and lack of proper tradition, it's like a partial tradition. When it reignited, then there is a change in the order of divinities, etc. So by that time, Vishnu became very prominent, because Vishnu is basically the after Rigveda, whatever Vishnu we see there, it is basic that Vishnu is basically a kind of a aspect of Sri Krishna himself. So Sri Krishna's
You're saying Vishnu is an aspect of Sri Krishna, not the other way around.
It is like, of course, in the Purana, Krishna is a avatar of Vishnu, but there is a difference between the Rigvedic Vishnu and the Puranic Vishnu. In the Rigveda, the Vishnu is basically an assistant of Indra.
Yeah.
Even though definitely he comes as very smart. Sometimes Indra needs the help of Vishnu, but still Vishnu is only assistant of Indra, right? But in the Mahābhārata, you see a lot of transformations, right? There is a narrative, whether it is historical or not, that is debatable, where Krishna is confronting Indra. In the early days, there is a Govardhana puja happening as a kind of an alternative competition for the Indra worship. So basically, what happens is that the Yadavas, they were one of the Rigvedic tribes. So they have a change of mind. Like, for example, just like the Purus, they were also Indra worshippers. But then the Yadavas were concentrated in the Govardhana, Mathura region. So they had a kind of realignment. They started worshipping the nature, like mountains, etc. And some of them said, like, the mountain is giving the rains, not Indra. And that is what represented in the conversation of Sri Krishna to his villagers, saying that, look, the Indra, we always worship Indra, but actually the Govardhana is actually giving us all the wealth, all the food, and all the rain. So we should worship the Govardhana. Then you can see, there is Indra become angry, and then he makes the flood and
thunderstorm and everything. Yeah.
Storm, etc. And then in the Mahābhārata later stage, we know Krishna and Arjuna were living, enjoying in the forest in the Indraprastha. Then Agni came and said, I need to this Khandava
burn the forest, all the animals and everything. Yeah.
All right. So saying that whenever I try to burn the forest, Indra will start raining. So I am not able to consume it. So there is a Rigvedic Devata Agni is contrasting with the Rigvedic Devata Indra. And then again a power struggle you can see. So Krishna and Arjuna, who are the new heroes, started supporting Agni. And slowly in that battle, Indra is defeated. So you can see some transformation happening. The early conflict of Krishna with Indra in the childhood. Then as an adult with Arjuna, he is again conflicting with Indra. So naturally, after the Mahābhārata period is over, Krishna becomes the biggest god.
He kind of overthrew Indra in a way by defeating. Yeah. Generally, that is the transfer of power.
Transfer of, maybe priorities.
Yeah,
because
priorities. Yeah,
Devatas are not. Devatas remain static, but our connection with the Devatas change. So we actually get more connection with Krishna compared to Indra.
Because he was also there in flesh and blood.
Yeah, yes.
That could also be the reason, right? You something similar to the human body. Yeah.
Yeah. And there is another theory which I have slightly put it, maybe it's not very much prominently mentioned in the Rigveda, that within Rigveda itself, the Yadavas were having the pattern god as Vishnu. That is also another possibility.
Could be possible. Yeah, could be possible. Yeah, absolutely.
The Purus have the pattern god as Indra.
Why not?
And the Rigveda is completely dominated by the Purus, so automatically the Indra becomes the dominant god. But the contemporary Yadavas might have given priority to Vishnu.
Yeah.
So naturally, their own local hero, their own historical hero becomes the incarnation of Vishnu. And then onwards, they started promoting Krishna. And the post-Rigvedic Vishnu, every attribute is connected with Krishna actually. Because Krishna's city, Dwaraka, is inside an ocean called, that ocean is today known as Ran of Kutch. Dwaraka I have identified with
it's dried up now, right? It's no more there.
Dried up. And this ocean was actually the biggest generator of wealth, because this Ran of Kutch was an ancient ocean during this 2500 to 2000 BC, where I put Krishna's lifetime. So that Dholavira was the most prosperous port city of the Harappan civilization, and that Dholavira I have identified as Krishna's Dwaraka, and that information is in my third book, Geography of Rāmāyaṇa. Everybody can read. I mean, Geography of Mahābhārata. So that Dholavira, surrounded by this ocean, was the place where all the wealth was created. Almost maybe I would say around 40% of the wealth in the Indus Valley civilization was created in Dholavira because of the trade connections with the other Mesopotamia and other civilization. So that aspect is what I considered as transformed into the story of Ksheera Sagara Mathana. So Ksheera Sagara is mined, or the Sagara is actually excavated or churned to create wealth.
The ocean milk, the milk of ocean where Vishnu resides, is the Ksheer Sagar, right?
Yeah. So you have the Milky Ocean or a Ksheera Sagara, which is the ocean around Dholavira, and Vaikunta is basically Dwaraka itself. And the person who is sleeping in Vaikunta is Sri Krishna himself.
That is how you're correlating with the Puranic representation of Vishnu with the geographical representation of a human being called Krishna. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I don't deny the divinity of Krishna.
Of course, but
basically, he is a human in blood and flesh.
Yes.
Like compared to the Devatas, who can be considered as a consciousness representation.
Yes.
But here is a human in person and flesh and blood, and he lived actually. Historically, he lived, and he was living and sleeping in Dwaraka, and that Dwaraka is Vaikuntha, and the Krishna who is sleeping in the Dwaraka is Vishnu himself.
This is so fascinating. Wow.
The entire ocean surrounding it is the Ksheera Sagara, which is generating wealth. And you can see Lakshmi is mentioned as emerging from the Ksheera Sagara.
His consort.
And Lakshmi has a lot of connection with the Sumerian goddess Inanna. You can look at the Inanna and her...
Isis? Isis or...
Inanna is a goddess of Sumeria, because this Indus Valley civilization was trading with Sumeria, basically.
Acha, not the... Isis is the Egyptian goddess, because I have heard that Isis is the Lakshmi version of...
Yeah. I mean, see, Inanna's transformations into... Inanna is a Sumerian goddess. She got into westward, got transformed into the Western civilization like Egypt. And in the Egypt, she may be represented as Isis.
Yes.
In the Greek, she is Aphrodite.
Yeah.
In the Roman, she is Venus. So the goddess is represented in different way. But Inanna came to Bharata in the form of Lakshmi. So you can see the Sumerian trade happening with Dholavira, and then Lakshmi is emerging from that Ksheera Sagara. She is a representation of Inanna in Bharatiya form, basically. Because the way she is represented, her Vahana, her icon is owl. Inanna's iconic representation of Inanna, you can see an owl. And that owl is the Vahana of Lakshmi.
Yes.
So basically a Sumerian connection you can see. And of course, it's not just Lakshmi, but Inanna is riding a lion. And that lion riding concept is coming into Durga also. So there is so much of, it's not a linear connection, but in a
interplay. It's an interplay in a way.
Yeah, right. So, but the primary kind of descendants or primary connection is between Inanna and Lakshmi, but of course, connected with Durga and other Devatas as well. So there is a give and take between Sumeria and Mesopotamia. So I am not saying everything came from Mesopotamia to India, but because opposite also happened. Because in our ancient literature, you have Manu's son Uttanapada,
yes.
And the Uttanapada is there in the Sumerian flood stories. Uttanapishtim. So Gilgamesh basically travel into a foreign land. Basically, that is Indus Valley civilization itself, and he connects with Uttanapishtim, who was the survivor of the flood. And here in our text, Manu is the survivor of the flood, and Manu's son Uttanapada is described as the survivor of the flood in the Sumerian flood myths. So there is so much of connection. So a lot of information came from India to Sumeria, and vice versa. Some information from Sumeria to India also came. And the gateway is Dwaraka. Dwaraka itself means gateway.
Absolutely, Dwar.
Yes. The meaning of Dwaraka is
door. Dwarka means gateway.
It was the gateway through which the wealth entered into the Indus Valley civilization, the trade wealth.
Wow.
Dholavira was the Dwarka city, so sport city, which was collecting all the wealth. And this wealth was primarily reaching to the political center, that is Kuru Rashtra. So that is why Krishna is very much interested in changing the rulership of the Kuru Rashtra, etc. Because Krishna basically is a part of the trader community, and he is basically in charge of all the trade, all the wealth creation, etc. But political power is in Hastinapura. So it is very important for Krishna to have the people who are allied to him to be ruling Hastinapura.
And his cousins were Pandavas.
Yes, that is why he promoted Yudhishthira as the emperor of the entire country, so that all these things will move very smoothly like that. Okay, of course, we are entering into the Mahābhārata part.
Yeah,
so
we'll come to that when we do a specific call. Mr. Jijith, now we have talked about the Rishis, we have talked about the Devas. Very interesting thing I want people to know. Please talk a little bit about the kings and the clans, some of the kings and the clans. I also want you to touch upon the Ikshvaku, because that is somehow relevant to now we know that Ram was an Ikshvaku because of books and everything. So some of the kings and clans, Ikshvaku, and that war of the 10 kings. Because I also want to explore with you the angle of India and Persia. Because there is some clan which went to Puru, I think some which went to Persia or modern Persia, something like that. Because there is also an angle of Avastyan Gatha and Rigveda. I also want to understand whether the contemporaries of what. So let's start with kings and clans, the war of 10 kings, and then we move toward the Persian and the Gatha and the Avastyan angle, which you have mentioned in the book as well.
Yes. Yeah, it's a very interesting narrative. Anyway, when I talked about Rishis, I did talk about some of the kings, but if we start, then the oldest individual with some power, so we don't call them kings, but they hold some power, is the oldest one is Manu.
Yeah, Manu Smriti that we know of is what his that is. Yeah.
The oldest that we know about. Like before that, we only have a Devata Vivasvat. So Manu is mentioned as a son of Vivasvat. So basically, the Vivasvat himself is the 8th son of Aditi. But then, if there is a person Manu, basically he may be a worshipper of Vivasvat and automatically called son of Vivasvat. So ultimately, the oldest personality we can get in Rigveda or in any oldest text of our Bharatiya Itihas is Manu. And Manu have a son and a daughter. Ikshvaku is the son of Manu, and Ila is the daughter of Manu. And we have two places connected with, one is with Manu, that is Manusha, which is there in the Haryana, very close to Saraswati river. And Ila is represented by Ilaspada, another place. They are very close to each other, around few kilometers between. And they comes on the banks of a river called Abhaya, which was the ancient channel through which Saraswati flowed. And of course, Saraswati changed the course slightly, and this river became a tributary of Saraswati. So entire transformation is visible in the pre-Rigvedic and early Rigvedic period. So in that area, that is on the banks of Saraswati, we have established Manu lived and Ila lived. So naturally, the Manu's eldest son Ikshvaku, that is the brother of Ila, he is also assumed to be, because the place is not mentioned, so he is assumed to be living in the same locality, probably in the Manusha itself, because typically the son will inherit the father's place.
Yeah.
And so Manu and Ikshvaku lived in the Manusha, and Ila lived in the Ilaspada. And that is in today we cannot imagine that the daughter have some political power, but in the ancient period it was not like that. So Ila also have a dynasty started, and that in that dynasty Pururavas, Ila's son Pururavas become the next king. After Ila become a ruler Ila, and Pururavas become the next king. And Pururavas onwards we call them properly kings. So Pururavas is there. Pururavas son Ayus son Nahusha, Nahusha's son Yayati, and Yayati's 5 sons are mentioned. But in the Rigveda, the relationship is not very clearly defined. But in the later Puranas, we see that the Yadu, Purvasu, then Drihyu, Anu, and Puru. Rigveda mentioned all the 5 of them. Under many places they are mentioned. But the connections are only clear in the later texts like Puranas. But we don't have any conflict with Rigveda, so we accept it. So we have these 5 sons. Of course, from the Mahābhārata and other Puranas, we get that Yadu and Turvasu were born from Devayani, that is the daughter of Shukracharya, and then 3 other sons, Drihyu, Anu, Puru, from Sharmishta, who is a Asura princess. That is a Daitya princess from Rishabha. So anyway, whichever way, there are 5 sons, and the 5 sons created dynasties. So you have Yadavas coming from Yadu, then this Turvasa is a kind of extinct dynasty. The Turvasas merged with the Yadus or with the other three tribes. Then you have that got extinct, but then you have Drihus, who are actually somewhat ancestral towards many of the European language speakers. Like Drihu language, slightly, the daughter language of Drihu, this is identified to be these European languages like Germanic, Celtic, Germanic, Slavic, and Italic, like that. There are, I think, 6 languages. That is Germanic, Italic, Celtic, Baltic, and Slavic. So the Germanic generated the English and Belgian, Dutch, etc., German, etc. And this Italic generated the French, etc. Then Slavic become Russian and Slovenian and all this, and Baltic the Norwegian languages.
So the roots are from this clan. You are saying that the origins of these languages they can trace to the origins of the language of the clan.
Yeah. So the Drihus spoke a specific language, and that language diversified into the European languages in the Indo-European clan. Wow. But we don't say that there are actual descendancy, but language definitely is coming from that thing. And then you have Anus. So the Anu clan resulted into Anava lineage, and the Anavas we can see they are also mentioned as the Asuras in the Puranas, and in the Avestan text, the Iranian text, they are called Ahuras.
Ahuras.
So, identities, the Puranas call them Asuras, and in the Zoroastrian Avestan text, they are called Ahuras.
They also have a concept of Devas, which is the opposite of something.
So these, of course, they emerge as the siblings of the last son is Puru, and Puru's descendants were the Pauravas. So basically, the rulers of India are the Pauravas, basically.
The rulers of India are the Pauravas.
Especially the North Indian, other from Haryana onwards to the Uttar Pradesh, and then the westwards up to Afghanistan. They produce rulers, and they are all Pauravas, basically. Of course, in the western side, later dominated by the Anavas. So the Anavas, basically, they are called Ahuras and Asuras, but within them they have diversified into Danavas and Daityas. So of course you may have some confusion with the Puranic narrative where all of them are traced to Kashyapa, etc. But these are another later layer of information. So you have to just set aside the Kashyapa narrative to understand it very clearly. So basically the division is the Anavas were the ancient kind of lineage, and they are called Asuras in the Puranas and Ahuras in the Zoroastrian text. That is a historical narrative. And these Ahuras or the Danavas diversified into 2 groups called Danavas and Daityas. So why we call it is because in the Zoroastrian text, we have a river name called Daitya River.
In the Zoroastrian text, there's a river named Daitya River.
Daityo River, like that. Just as pronunciation Daityo, but it is understood as Daitya River. So basically, we can say the Zoroastrians were the Daityas, proper Daityas. And we have this Greek text, Yavanat Greek text, Iliad and Odyssey. We have their ancestors were Danans. So they were the Danavas, basically.
Is there a link then? I mean, is there a link then on these Danavas, the Daityas, and
for example, in the migration scenario, we have these Iranians and Armenians and Albanians and the Greeks migrating together as a group. So their diversification happened somewhere in the Iran. So when they left Bharata, and of course, Dasharajana battle is one of the events that resulted into their migration that we will talk later.
Yeah.
But when they migrated, they were not properly diversified. Of course, there is slight clarity we have among the Dasharajana battle, the kings who have fought the Dasharajana battle. You have names like the Alina. Alina is basically a proto form of the Hellenes or the Greeks. And you have Anavas, kings who are actually the ancestors of the Iranians. And you have Simyu, who are ancestors to the Albanians. And there is a Brgu, of course, the ancient Brgu people who are the priests of these Daityas or the Asuras. So they migrated and they become Phrygians. That is the ancestral Armenian people. So we have traceability of many of these southern European people, and they are traced to two clans mentioned in the Puranas as Daityas and Danavas. So Daityas were basically the people who migrated only up to Iran, but the Danavas again migrated further from the Iran westwards and reached up to Greece. And in the Greek literature, we can see all the heroes like Achilles, Agamemnon, and all the Greek kings, which are very famous in Iliad and Odyssey. Their ancestry is traced to Danans, which is basically another term for Danava. And
this is unbelievable that all these civilizations, we can trace their ancestry and origins to the Rigvedic times and clans.
yes, yes. It is not only stopping at the clan names, but river names like Dawn. That is a kind of rendering of the Danava river. That is Dawn. Then Nipper is another name, and then Danube. All these river names are generated from the name Danava. Danava term transformed into these three river names. So three rivers in the Europe, the most major rivers, that is Don, Nipper, and the Danube. All three are actually named after Danu, who is a goddess mentioned in the Rigveda, and this goddess is a river goddess. She is a goddess of river, especially the rivers generated from snow. So Danu in the Rigveda means the water droplet coming from a snow, and Danu also means a river. So that Danu, the children of Danu have become the Danavas, and they wherever they went, they give the name that goddess Danu's name they give to rivers, because that is where they are in the memory. They were migrating from the Rgvedic land, that is the Indus Valley region. Of course, slightly before the Indus Valley developed into a great civilization, because these migrations, our date happened around 4000 BC. That time, the Indus Valley civilization was just starting up. So they don't have any, they don't have any later understanding about the Indus Valley civilization. But the earlier precursory stages of the Indus Valley civilization, that memory they have. At that time, the rivers are named after Danu, goddess Danu, and that is what the Danava rivers, that is Don, Nipper, and Danube, signifies. So they are all Danavas basically. That is all inspired by Danavas or influenced by Danava kind of a philosophy. But the people who are in Iran, that is Zoroastrian, their primary river name is Daitya River. So which is this Daitya River? That is a lot of speculation are there. Some people identify the Daitya River with Saraswati.
Yeah, that's what even I have heard. Yeah,
but in my analysis, I identified it with two candidate rivers. That is, one is the Chenab River, Asikni, because it is called a dark river. So dark river is basically, this is again the Aryan Invasion Theory, consider it as a describing Dravidians, etc. But it is basically because the enemies of kings like Sudas, who was the main hero of the Dasharajana battle, they were all living together, concentrated on the river Asikni. That is why, because of the enmity, that river is called Asikni River. It may not be even a dark river. Some people call the Asikni River as dark river, but today, when you go to Chenab, we don't see the river color is dark or anything. So the darkness comes because of the enmity. That all my enemies are living in this river. So that river I call as Asikni River. So that same Asikni River could be the Daitya River, which is mentioned in the Zoroastrian text, because they were living in that Asikni River, and that time the Dasharajana battle happened on the Parushni River, because they came to eastwards to fight with Sudas, and Sudas came from east to westwards, and they both clashed in the Parushni River. And in that battle, despite there were 10 kings, with Sudas on the one side and the 10 kings on the other side, and one of the leader was Kavichayamana, who is an Anava leader. And in between, very less people know, there was a Puru king called, he is definitely mentioned as Puru in the Rigveda, but I have identified him as the ancestor of the Pandavas, the Samvarana, because he is having a nickname called Paurava in the Mahābhārata itself. And he is mentioned as being defeated by the Panchalas and living in exile in Sindhu region, etc., which is matching perfectly with the Dasharajana battle. So this Puru, who is Samvarana, also have support with along with the Anava leader Kavichayamana and 10 other people I mentioned, like Simyus, Alinas. Then there was Paktas and Phalanas. Paktas are the Paktuns who become also become terrorists today. And you have Phalanas who are the Baluchistan people. And there are Shivas. They are basically Central Asian ancestors. And you have Vishanas who are Kashmiris. The the people who are speaking the Kashmiri or Dardic languages. Dardic is the higher family of the Kashmiri. So Kashmiri is a Dardic language. So all the Dardic family of languages emerge from the Vishana group who have participated in the Chaitanya battle. So a lot of ethnicities from Kashmir, Central Asia, Afghanistan, Balochistan, Pakistan, and Iran, and the west of Iran, that is basically Greece, Albania, Armenia, and Europe. Everything is traceable, linguistically traceable into Rigvedic battle.
And they were basically the clan members, the various clans, and they might have fought in war. Some might have lost, some might have migrated because of the loss, some might want to shift to a different land, and then they settled in those areas, and then the clans developed independently in a way, and then eventually became a separate country altogether. Is there some mention of any kind of governance system?
Yes. In the Rigveda, you can see that of course, many people see that Rigveda is an agrarian civilization.
Yeah.
But you can see, of course, this is true, but it mentioned about hundreds of cities. And it mentioned about 400 plus kings ruling in that area. So if you count the number of kings mentioned in the Rigveda, count the number of Indus Valley settlements currently we have on earth, it's more or less 400. So kings are also 400, settlements also 400. So they are perfectly matching. And you will be surprised, the biggest economy of Indus civilization is agriculture, which is exactly same as in the Rigveda.
Yeah.
So there is no mismatch between the attributes of the Indus Valley civilization and the Rigvedic civilization. Both were agricultural dominated. Even though there are trade, everything is happening in the Dholavira, the primary economy was led by agriculture. And that is exactly in the Rigveda. Rigveda also said the primary economy was agriculture. And of course, Rigveda mentioned about trade. Rigveda mentioned about ships. Rigveda mentioned about wealth coming through ships and oceans. That is exactly what is there in the Dholavira. So every aspect in the Rigveda is perfectly matched in the Indus Valley civilization.
Makes sense. So, but Mr. Jijith, now tell me, what then is the relationship between Rigveda and Avesta? And what is Avesta for those who do not know? If you can just explain, because I really want to understand. Are these sister philosophies or what?
Yeah, so basically I have to talk about this battle. Like I will tell
the Battle of 10 Kings. Yeah.
The Battle of the 10 Kings. So earlier, the oldest homeland of the Iranian people, what we call today Iranian people or the Proto-Iranian people, that was in the Haryana. Just like the Purus, they were all living together in the Haryana region. So you can see one of the earliest Anava king, Abhyavartin Chayamana, he was ruling in the Haryana region, and he was having a joint military expedition along with the ancestor of Sudas called Srinjaya, Devavata. So Srinjaya is one of the oldest Bharata king, and he was hand in hand with Abhyavartin Chayamana and Anava. They were all together. They were happily and like almost like friends. They were living together and fighting battles. But after some time, after this Srinjaya, then the king Devatas, and after Devatas, sometime Pradardana, and then the king Sudas emerged. And Sudas was really a politically very active person, and he has a lot of political ambitions. And Vishwamitra was his advisor, and he himself was a military. He was not like a rishi. Basically, he was more or less like a military person, because there is a Rigveda mention he going and attacking the Kikadas in the eastern side and conquering that region, etc. So he is a advisor as well as a military, maybe probably kind of a, we cannot 100% call him a priest. Basically, he was an advisor with the military qualities. And at that time, Sudas expanded his territory up to Vibhas Sududri, with the support of Vishwamitra. And Vishwamitra himself is leading the army crossing across the confluence of Bia Satluj instead of horse driven, it is bull driven chariots of the 3000 BC, 3200 BC period. So this Suda has become very dominant. So there are other kings like Abhyavartin Chayamana's son, descendant Kavi Chayamana was ruling in Haryana. He was expelled. He was expelled to the west of Parushni river, which Suda considered as his border territory. That up to here it's my dominion. You don't live here. You should go out. So Kavi Chayamana was pushed away. Similarly, Samvarana, who is his cousin, of course, because Ajamida is their common ancestor. The Ajamida's three lines diversified. One is the Vishwamitra line, the Kushiga line, and another is the Tritsu Panchala line. That is earlier called Trishtus, and later on they assumed the name Pachala. And that is how in the Mahābhārata they are represented. And the third line is the Samvarana line, which is leading towards Kuru and finally to Pandavas and Kauravas. So these three lines are very famous, three lines of the Achamita lineage. That is the very famous Bharata lineage, diversified into three branches. So this that means Samvarana is a cousin, a remote cousin of Sudas. So he was also ruling there, but when he have this ambitions of conquest, just like Kavi Chayamana, Samvarana was also banished, and he was also to the out of the west of Parishni river. So there this Samvarana, otherwise known as Kuru, he had a kind of similarity with the Kavi Chayamana. They become joined together.
Alliance, yeah.
They formed a confederation because Sudha should not expand beyond Parishni. That was their plan. So they brought in all the other kings, clans ruling in that Asikni river, which we call the Thier river, that Chenab river. And then it is there the proto, all the Indo-European speakers, ancestors were living there. So that is why we have Simyus, Alinas, Bhaktas, Kalanas, Shivas, then the Vishanas, all kinds of, all these people assembled. So total 10 tribes assembled together and fought the battle. And after the battle, they were very severely defeated in the battle. And there is a reason that the Vasishta praised Indra, and Indra created a flood in Parishni. So Parishni is favorite river of Indra. Indra created a flood for Sudas in Parishni. In that flood, 90% of the soldiers perished, and the remaining 10% Sudas easily defeated. So this is how Sudas won the battle. As a consequence of it, all the defeated enemies have to flee. Out of which Samvarana had got a luck. He was the luckiest person. He was got asylum in the Ikshvaku territory. That is the Western Sarayu region. The Western Sarayu is the Haro river, which flow into the Sindhu as an eastern territory, eastern tributary. So in that Sindhu Sarayu region, so the Samvarana got asylum. And the Anava kings, some of them stayed with the Samvarana, others fled further westwards. And these further migrating waves of the Anavas, they went into Afghanistan and slowly reached Iran. And then Iran became their homeland. So that is how they identify themselves as Iranians. But their memories in their Avestan Vendida, they write that there are 16 homelands, 16 homelands of the Ahuras, which include many places in India. For example, Aryan Invasion is a place where there is an extreme cold, that is 10 months of winter and 2 months of summer, which we can easily identify with the Kashmir, Dras Valley, etc., where it is totally 10 months it is extreme cold and only 2 months there is light summer. So that is the Kashmir region. And then you have, they say we have lived in another homeland called Varena, which is four-cornered. And this is a very clinching because in the Rigveda, the Kurukshetra region is called Vara Prithivya. So Vara Prithivya and the Varena, that the Avestans say their earlier homeland, they matches. And we know that Abhiyarthin Chaimana was a king ruling there. So everything matches each other. And in the Mahābhārata, Kurukshetra is called four-cornered. So Rigveda time Vara Prithivya, same region is mentioned in the Itihasas as Kurukshetra. Same region, four-corner region is mentioned as Varena in the Avestan text. So we can collaborate. Yeah. And then they talk about the Mauru because they were beaten from the Kurukshetra. So then they lived in Mauru region. The Mauru is another homeland. And Mauru is the Maru Pradesh, Marubhumi. That is the Rajasthan region. So out of the 16 homelands of the Ahuras, where they lived before the Iran, when they reached Iran, many places are in India, like Kashmir, like the Kurukshetra, like Marubhumi, that is Rajasthan desert. And then they mentioned Rgveda, that is Sarasvati, as another place where they live. Yeah. Then they mentioned Harayu as another place they live.
Sarayu.
Haro river, that is Sarayu.
River.
Not Uttar Pradesh Sarayu, but Western Sarayu. So they lived there. And so everywhere they can trace their entire homeland with the India and Pakistan region. And last, they mentioned a land of horses. That is Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So in their migratory trail, they have mentioned places in India. Then they mentioned places in Pakistan. And the last, they mentioned places in Afghanistan. That completes their trail, migratory trail.
Yeah.
And then finally, they did a test, of course, as natural. Finally, once they settled in Iran, they say Iran is the Aryan Invasion. And from that name Aryan Invasion, it got shortened, and from that Iran The term Iran itself coming from Aryan Invasion.
That's very interesting.
Identification. The original Aryan Invasion is the Airavada region, that is the Kashmir region. From there, they migrated, reached Iran. So they got all the memory got erased, or they lost connection with India and Pakistan and Afghanistan. Now they are living in Iran. So suddenly they say this is Aryan Invasion. That is Iran. That from the Aryan Invasion, the Veja part removed, then Aryana, then that become Iran.
Mr. Jijith, one question comes to my mind. If they were all the clans of the same Rigvedic era and, they belong to the same thing, couldn't, the clan which got defeated and eventually went to Iran, couldn't they also have used the help of the sages and the seers to grant? I mean, very logically speaking, if I am of a particular region, yeah.
So they say, for example, the Brigu Rishis, they were the priests of these Asuras. That is why you can see when they migrated westward, there was a branch of Brigus who went along with them. They become the Phrygians. The Phrygians means the Armenian people. They were basically the Brigu family. So some part of the Brigus continuously lived with the Bharata kings.
Makes sense.
They are the Bhargavas. The Bhargavas stayed with our Vedic kings. Yeah. They are the Brigus who stayed with the Vedic kings. Another branch of the Brigus went with the Asuras, and they are the Phrygians, etc.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
no, please continue. You were saying something. Yeah, please.
What I'm saying is that they have the shared pantheon with the Rgvedic. All the entire Rgvedic, they were the pantheon they share.
And this, what you just explained, and we'll cover this thing at the last, is what is called as out of India theory. This basically is the out of India theory, wherein you have these migrations coming from India and going to various other countries and regions.
Yes. So because the last to migrate is the Avestan people.
Yeah.
And they share the most common
similarities and traits, yes.
Because the other people, if you look at the Europeans, they only have very faint memories of the river Danu. Because all the rivers are called Danu in the early Rigvedic period. So that river name they took, and then they started naming the rivers in Europe as Danu, Danube. So apart from that, you don't see any kind of memory of Rigveda in the Europeans. But the Avestans were the last to migrate, separate from the Vedic people. So that is why the Zoroastrian have almost 70 to 75% Rigvedic kind of narratives in the Avestan text. But only one Devata alone they have considered as an enemy. So that is
Indra.
Why they call the Asuras as divine beings, and the Devas enemies. It's not properly demon. Some people translate the Devas as demon, but not demon, but anti-Devatas. I mean anti-divine.
Yeah. So basically it was a grudge. It was a grudge which resulted in the nomenclature and the philosophy and the concept. And I think that is the reason, logical, I think so, and you validate me if you think this is right. I think that's the reason why a prophet like Zoroaster came up in that region denouncing the existence of everything and believing in a monastic religious school of thought, only one God, no 10, 20, 30, 40, just one.
That God came from the Hiranyakashipu, because he was basically advocating that there is only one God, that is me, myself.
Yeah.
That is, I am Varuna, I am the only one God, and you should not worship Vishnu or Indra or anybody.
Yeah.
So that philosophical concept get ingrained into the Zoroastrian text.
And that became the foundation for all the other monastic religions to follow, the Abrahamical and the Islamic.
Monotheistic religions, yeah, you're correct.
Very fascinating.
Because the Iranians occupied in the historical period, the Iranians occupied Israel, right? You know that.
What?
So the Iranians occupied...
I had no idea. Is it?
Yeah. So the Iranians there was a power struggle in Israel. So first the Sumerian, the Mesopotamian people became the rulers of Israel. But then the Iranians were enemies of the Mesopotamians. So they defeated the Mesopotamia and freed all the Israelites. So all these people who established Judaism, their ancestors were freed by the Iranian kings in around 500 BC. So the 500 BC is the start of Judaism. That is the very formative period of Judaism. 1000 BC to 500 BC is the formative period of Judaism. So they were something the Iranians were their saviors. So they took so much of elements from the Iranian theology. So they got this monotheism from them. One of the sources of monotheism, Judaic monotheism, is Zoroastrianism.
Interesting. Very fascinating. And how then from Judaism, Christianity and Islam. Mr. Jijith, now we'll come to the part of the rivers, the geographical part of the rivers and the significance. So I want to ask you the first question. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the key aspects of your book is the geographic relevance and importance of the rivers, and you have emphasized a lot on the geography. Why do you think that mainstream scholarship has largely overlooked this aspect for so long? Why is it that now we are getting to see your book, this kind of a book? Why there has not been in the past such a scholarly level of work with respect to the geography, with respect to the rivers, and what is the importance that the rivers hold when we are trying to understand the ecosystem of the Rigveda?
Yeah, that's a one of them is the initial misrepresentations, because for the 200 years got wasted because they have a very kind of high level understanding of the Rigveda. Of course, there are some pioneering studies where the initial activities like translations of the Rigveda into English or German, all these things happen. So they were not in a position to go deeper into the Rigveda. That is what is the Western world has done, where they failed to understand. And some of the recent identification of rivers were very poor. Like Michael Witzel identified the Yavivedi river with some Pakistan river. It's all complete nonsense. So I got that Yavivedi is a kind of a distributary of Yamuna, and it was flowing in Haryana. And the river dynamics very clearly shows the Yavivedi and Haryupia, two rivers were running in parallel, where Abhivartin, Chaimana and Sanjaya were chasing common enemy. That happened in the Haryana geography between river Saraswati and Yamuna. So two big rivers, Yamuna and Saraswati, there are two small rivers, Yavivedi and Haryupia. That is very clear from the geographical information in the Rigveda as well as in the Mahābhārata. So that's joint analysis. But some of these scholars, Western scholars, totally fail in identifying the river properly. So they identified the Zob river in the Pakistan, etc., which totally, completely derailed their understanding of the geography of the Rigveda. Second one is the improper understanding of the chronology of the Rigveda. So for that, you have to completely give credit to Srikanth Alagiri, who have properly analyzed the chronological sequencing of the Rigvedic mandalas. So he finds that the oldest kings and the oldest rishis are found in the 6th mandala, that is the Bharadwaja mandala, where the oldest kings like Devatas, Sanjaya, Devatas, Pratardana, all of them were ruling. And then comes the 3rd mandala, where Sudas, one of the most dominant king of Rigveda, and the 7th mandala is contemporary to the 3rd mandala. 3rd mandala attributed to Vishwamitra and 7th mandala to Vasishta. So two priests of Rigveda, two priests of Sudas compose the 3rd and 7th mandala. And then comes the 4th mandala, where we see descendants of Sudas like Sahadeva. And you have the 1st mandala after the 4th mandala, where you have this Sahadeva's son Swamakala. So that entire lineage of the ancestors of the Panchalas. These are all people are ancestors of Panchalas. That is very clearly, nicely understand in the, so that chronology sequencing was an important aspect that Alagiri has done, which is actually helped me a lot, because that sequencing, if it is not there, then my research will not be happening. So proper understanding of the chronology of the Rigveda helped me to make a leaps and bounds in the river identification, as well as getting more and more further insights in the Rigveda, which the Western scholars just floundered, even though they have huge amount of manpower, resources, etc. They just floundered it. The traditional side, what happened? The traditional scholars are very well versed in reciting the Rigveda. They can recite Rigveda 1,000 times better than me, but they cannot, and they are not either. They are not totally interested in looking at deeper into the meaning, context, and meaning of Rigveda. Even though if they understand something that is only philosophical meaning, they are concerned with. They are not concerned with the geographical connotation. They are not concerned with the chronological values. So the two disciplines are totally ignored by the traditional scholarship. So there are great Vidwans, great scholars who can recite the Rigveda 10,555 suktas by heart. Everything. There are in Kerala, there is a tradition of reciting Rigveda in the rivers. So they are super experts in the Rigvedic recitation that totally have no interest or no competency in studying the chronology and geography which is inherent in the Rigveda. So both this is how the failures happened. And fortunately, by the divine grace of Sri Krishna, I'm a devotee of Krishna. So I was guided in the proper manner. One is thankfully the scholarship of Sri Kantalagiri, and then with my own research, which started in the 2005 with Aurobindo's books. And then 2008, I got familiarized with Sri Kantalagiri's books. So these were the main sources. And then slowly, my own studies, like I established the Rigvedic wiki, which is a sub-wiki inside my site, Ancient Voice, where I have analyzed many 3,000 plus nouns in the Rigveda and then connected the noun to another noun, bone data analysis, frequency analysis. So many analyses I've done from 2011 onwards. And that helped me to reach a certain level of maturity from 2011 to as late as 2021. 10 years, I did a deep study. And then 2001, I started writing the book on the Rigveda. Even then, strangely, my plan was to write a book on the Mahābhārata, where I have produced so many research papers, like around 8 research papers and conferences. So when I started writing the book on Mahābhārata, then something pulled me, because I see that some of the things are hyperbolic in the Mahābhārata, some exaggerations. And so unless I base my studies on something very solid, so that is Rigveda basically. Because Rigveda is not a text which underwent a lot of evolution, etc. Because I said it's like a tape recorder.
I want to ask you a question first around Ganga, and there are a couple of angles. First part of the question is that what type and kind of description or mention of Ganga is there in the Rigveda? That's the first part, that what is mentioned in Rigveda around Ganga. And the second part of the question is that why in today's time Ganga is regarded as a holy river where people actually do ceremonial praying.
Ganga is the easternmost river mentioned in the Rigveda. That is another important significance of Ganga.
Sorry, what most mentioned?
It is the easternmost river. The most mentioned river is Sarasvati.
Saraswati, that is Saraswati.
The cradle of civilization existed. But Ganga is the easternmost river mentioned in the Rigveda. So it was the eastern boundary of the Rigvedic civilizational region, with the Saraswati as a central river. So Saraswati is the most mentioned river. Then comes Sindhu as the second most mentioned river. So of course, in the Indus Valley, if you look at the most cities were on Saraswati and second most cities were on Sindhu.
Sindhu.
And in Ganga river, there is an Alamgirpur, one city which is very close to Ganga. But Ganga was like an eastern territory where a lot of trade was happening. So the first time the Ganga is mentioned is a trade relationship of a trade merchant called Bradu. And he has established a trade outpost in Ganga. It was called Urkaksha. Urkaksha basically is not a place name, but it is basically a wide seashore, wide shore in the Ganga river. That shore was used for trade. So what was they were trading? Because the east of Ganga was more or less forest region. And the main thing that was there in the forest was the elephants. And these elephants, of course, it's maybe from the today's point of view, maybe we may consider it as a little bit cruelty. But the elephants were hunted for their ivory. And the ivory is used for creating a lot of artifacts like ivory statues, etc., which were trade item, which goes into all over through Tholavira. These trade items will pass to Ganga and then Saraswati and reach up to Tholavira. From there, they are traded into Mesopotamia and faraway civilizations. So the ivory products are found in Indian Indus Valley. Ivory products are found all over the other civilizations, contemporary civilizations, especially Mesopotamia. So the Ganga region was primarily a forest area with sources like elephants, forest products, etc. That is how Rigvedic people have a connect with Ganga. But of course, the sacredness is not yet reached. Ganga is just the boundary of the Rigvedic region, and they will go for hunting the elephants. And by the way, that is the reason why the cities close to Ganga is called the city of elephants, like Varanavati and Hastinapura. They were all emerged because of the elephant trade. So the elephants were used for in getting their ivory and also for training them for warfare. So that becomes Chaturanga army. So Indian armies are very special because anywhere else you have cavalry and foot soldiers and chariots. But if you have the fourth element, that is elephants. That is because of the Ganga and the forests in Ganga, which have plenty of elephants. And that is the reason why the cities like Varanavata and Hastinapura developed. So that was the kind of economical region that is only significance in the Ganga. But then the second thing we know about Ganga in the Rigveda, it is only mentioned 4 times. So second time it is mentioned as Jannavi, as the daughter of Janu. That means Vishwamitra have that territory in his fold. Then you have the Ganga in the Nadi Sukta, and in the one more reference to Ganga I don't remember, but 4 references for Ganga is there in the Rigveda. Again, I think the third reference is also in the third mandala, Ganga. And so these are the references to Ganga in the Rigveda. So you can see it's a emerging similarity with Ganga. But then, of course, the post-Rigvedic period is where it is sacredness, because the entire Saraswati is what dried up, water flow reduced. So when I say Saraswati dried up, primary dried up was from the southern part of the Saraswati, from Vinachana onward. That is, Vinachana is very close to the Punjab-Rajasthan border in Pakistan. It's in Pakistan, but very close to Punjab-Rajasthan border. So that you can identify its location, and that's why I'm saying it. So from there onwards, the Ganga, Saraswati got dried up. So the people who were living here there earlier, like Sagara and his descendant got migrating. They started migrating. The Ikshvakus who were living in the southern part got migrating earlier, and they reached the Yamuna and Ganga and then Sarim, like Amshumat and Bhagirath and then Ajadasharadharam. So similarly, in the northern side, Saraswati was flowing, but it was very small. Like it's not like a mighty river anymore, and it was not sustaining the big cities. The kings like Kurus, they cannot live there and run a big city there, because that much water is not there in Saraswati. So they were in search of another river, and then they find Yamuna was again a small river compared to Ganga. The most water was in Ganga, so the Saraswati people primarily migrated to Ganga river. So all the sacredness associated with Saraswati got transposed to Ganga. That is why Ganga became the most sacred river, and Saraswati become the memory basically.
So Mr. Jijith, now, because you're talking about Ganga and Saraswati, now the last part, and I want to go deep as much as time as you can. Please tell as much as you can about Saraswati, its importance, why it was the cradle of civilization, what was the characteristics of Saraswati with which people were enamored by it. I want to know everything about Saraswati. Why did it die out? How did it die out? Please explain the historical relevance, the importance, and the spiritual element that is associated with Saraswati, and why it was called the cradle of civilization.
So I will clear some misconception even among the researchers.
Yes, please do that.
So the researchers, this has been often repeated statement that the Saraswati is a snow-fed river. And,
is a what? What river?
Snow-fed river. The river's primary source is snow. That is the primary. Most of the Indian researchers claim that, like river Saraswati is a snow-fed river, and Satluj river brought snow water into Saraswati. Yamuna river brought snow water into Saraswati. All these are true, but one thing they don't know is during the Rigvedic period, these rivers separated. So whatever snow-fed status of Saraswati is true, and you can in the archaeology, if you dig, you get snow signature in Saraswati, right? There are a lot of research. There is a Saraswati Research Center established by Haryana State Development Board, and they digged and they found the snow signature in Saraswati. All these are true, but big thing that researchers don't know is that this happened in the past of the Rigvedic period. So before the Rigvedic first sukta of the Rigveda was composed, the Saraswati was a snow-fed river, because Satluj was flowing directly into it, and Yamuna was flowing directly into it. The entire the picture of a map of rivers were totally different from today. But from the early Rigveda onwards, if you analyze the the analysis, and you plot that the river data into the map, you can see Satluj is flowing into Sindhu, because very clearly Satluj, that is Sudutri, is mentioned as a indicated, not direct mention, but indicated as a tributary of Sindhu. That is why it is in Nadi Sukta. Nadi Sukta is primarily about the connections of rivers. So it separates out the river tributaries of Sindhu, and Satluj happened to be part of it. So definitely the Nadi Sukta it clearly tells to you that Satluj was a tributary of Sindhu during the Rigvedic period. Similar is the case of Yamuna, that all the indications in the Rigveda is that Yamuna is a tributary of Ganga. So these are the facts. So what we have understood it, this gives an upper limit for the earliest that point of Rigveda to somewhere around 6000 BC. Before 6000 BC, the river Satluj and this Yamuna have flow into the river Ganga. River Saraswati. Satluj and Ganga had a direct flow or a distributory flow into this Saraswati river during that period. Then the point of divergence happens between 6000 BC to 4000 BC. Of course, it's not we cannot pinpoint the exact period because these are all small drift. So the river, how do the river migrate? So every centimeter it has to traverse, right? The river migrate means it cannot jump, right? Like a monkey jumping, it cannot jump. So definitely there was a transition period. Every year the river will move few meters to the east or west. All this happened. So whatever river that is mentioned in the early Rigvedic period, that Saraswati is a rainfed river. How do we understand that? Because it is mentioning there is a narrative about in the early Rigvedic period. The Rishis like Vasishta and Jamadagni, they were living somewhere else. And because of the prosperity of Saraswati, they came and settled in the Saraswati river bank. And they were referring to a rain. That in the rainy season, the river swells with water, rainwater. And the rain clouds are called Sarasvans. And Sarasvans Sarasvans start raining, and that rainwater is what swells Saraswati. So these are all indications of the rainfed river. Because there is no sukta which says that the river Saraswati is swelling with water during summer season. That is a property of a snow-fed river. So very clearly, Rigveda shows that the river Saraswati has reduced into a rain-fed river by the early Rigvedic period itself. So this is one important confusion in the minds of the researchers which I need to clarify. So the earliest references of the Saraswati make it into a rain-fed river with the rainwater as the primary source of the Saraswati. And it is during the rainy season, the river swells into a big river. And the same thing not only in the early Rigveda, even in the Mahābhārata it is mentioned. The Pandavas were living in the Kamyaga and Dvaitavena on the banks of Saraswati. And they also observed that during the rainy season, the river swells and doubles in size. The river Saraswati doubles in size.
Interesting.
So, very clear that from the early Rigvedic period to the Mahābhārata period, which is started just after the late Rigveda, the entire period it is very consistent, the rainfed river. So, this is another important information I need to give, which also gives aligns with our chronology of Rigveda from 3300 BC to 1900 BC and Kurukshetra war to 1793 BC, etc. Very clearly, it is conformed with it, and it was a rainfed river. But if you search into the Saraswati, you will get snow signature. That is a pre-Rigvedic period. In the pre-Rigvedic period, it was a snow-fed river. So then in the Rigveda, there is a past tense is mentioned. When the Bhrigu was there, Angirasa was there. Those period, the pre-Rigvedic period, the Saraswati might be a snow-fed river, no doubt about it. And that time, the Yamuna and the Satluj will be flowing into it. Like in the 8000 BC or 7000 BC, 6000 BC, you could have witnessed that. So there will be some Rigvedic Rishis, at least mentioned in the past tense, they might have witnessed this situation where Saraswati is a snow-fed river. But at least in the early Rigvedic period, witnessed by Jamadagni and Vasishta of that period. Of course, there is another Jamadagni and Vasishta in the 10th mandala also. So, but the early Rigvedic witness Rishis, they have seen it as a rainfed river. And then sacredness of Saraswati. So, just like Ganga is revered in the Puranas as a mighty river and a goddess, same status was for Saraswati throughout the Rigveda. So even though the river was the river, everybody knows that it was the river, but still they were worshipping the river as a goddess. So Saraswati is a goddess in the early Rigveda itself. So there are suktas in the early Rigveda praising the river goddess Saraswati. The Saraswati is called Mother, Madharam. Saraswati is called Mother, and Sindhu is also called Mother anyway.
Yeah, so they say Sindhuma. Yeah, is referred to as Sindhuma as well.
Madharam. Yeah. There is a term called Sindhu Madharam. So Saraswati is the mother. Ambitame, Naditame, like that, Devi Tame, Saraswati. That is the three attributes given to Saraswati. Ambitame means basically the great river. Devi Tame means the great goddess. Ambitame means great mother. Okay, sorry. So that is the term. So great mother, great goddess, great river, Saraswati. That was how Saraswati was praised. And there are many kings were mentioned as Saraswati Datta. Devatas is mentioned as a gift to his father. The king Devadasa is mentioned as a gift of Saraswati. That means he was a great king living in Saraswati. Ganga Datta, you know Ganga Datta is Bhishma Pitama. Similarly,
Oh, yeah, Ganga Putra. No, Ganga Putra.
Ganga Datta, Ganga
Yeah,
Putra, both the
Ganga
names
Putra.
are used for because he lived in the Ganga river and he was become a hero in the Ganga river valley. Similarly, Devadasa lived and nourished by the river river Saraswati. So
What do you mean, sir? What do you mean when you say nourished? I want to understand why were they revering it? It's just a river.
Because river, but see, the nourished means especially when the Devadasa will be a child, he will be walking around the shore of Saraswati. So the Devadasa will have a motherly relationship with Saraswati, but then he becomes a king. All his wealth will come from Saraswati. So the river is where the trade happens. And from the trade wealth comes.
Yeah, and you have also mentioned that somewhere in the book that the flow of Saraswati was very ferocious as well for the enemies also. Something like that. It also used to keep. So I wanted to,
protectress. She was a protectress. Because the river Saraswati was a very fierce river. So anybody coming from west, they will find it very difficult to defeat the kingdom of Devadasa.
Because they couldn't cross it?
She was nourisher.
Because they couldn't cross?
They could not cross it. Yes. It was a very ferocious river. So she was both the mother who nourished with wealth and she was a protectress, like a goddess she protects. So Saraswati protects them from enemies. Saraswati gives them wealth and nourish them. Even the wealth coming from Saraswati is called milk of Saraswati. So like a mother gives milk.
From her
Saraswati
breast.
gives
Yeah,
wealth.
got it. Yeah, got it. Yeah.
So that is how the Saraswati become Ambi Tame, the mother, the greatest mother. And Nadi Tame, greatest river. And Devi Tame, the greatest goddess.
When did it started dying out?
There was a global event. It's not just in Saraswati. The entire world faced a calamity that is called the 4.2K event. That is an event happened 4,200 years ago.
Okay.
And in the geology, climatology, it is called 4.2K event. It was a global dryness event. Because of the global dryness event, all the civilizations, anything that existed in the 2200 BC got affected. That's Mesopotamia, Egyptian, Chinese, Indus Valley. Every civilization got affected. There were 12 years no rains. For 12 years continuously there was no rains. And there was similar many such 12 years happened.
And this is nothing. This was not man-made. It is all natural. It was not because of some climate problems or human intervention.
It's not man-made. Like it's related to the precision of equinox and the tilt of their axis and some global climatic changes. You know the geology, right? So there was period when the temperature rise and there are period when temperature reduce. That is why we have Holocene epoch where the snow, the polar ice cap become very large, 3 times larger than what is today. So this geological event happened in the life history of Earth. The actual exact reasons we are not very clear, but the cyclicity of the precision of equinox and other cyclic phenomena plays a role. So there was a very like a local dryness event happened in 2200 BC, which the geologists call the 4.2K event. So this in 2200 BC, the complete rain stopped. So in the Mahābhārata and the Rāmāyaṇa, and there is a continuous mention about 12 years of drought. That is
12 years. Oh wow.
12 years no rains. So and we have to, looking at the literature, we have to assume that this 12 years kind of a drought situation happened multiple times. Not a single time it happened. Multiple times it happened. So in the Rāmāyaṇa, there is a mention, Atri's wife Anasuya mentioned to Sita that I have helped the people during the 12-year drought, and then that is Anavrishti for 12 years. And then Vishwamitra is mentioned in Mahābhārata roaming around in the 12-year drought. And then Mahābhārata begins with the statement, very in the initial chapters it says that there is a 12 years of no rain, and then they started doing yajna and all this thing. So the 12-year no rain, you keep on repeating in Ramayana and Mahābhārata. And that is basically referring to this 2200 BC, this 4.2K event. So that was one of the major reasons the Saraswati got suddenly dried up.
Are there traces of Saraswati even today? I mean, have we found something that we can say ki this was Saraswati?
Last part I will. So for example, Saraswati is sustained by 4 channels basically. One is the Khadar channel, that is the northern tributary of Saraswati. The Ganga channel served as the connection link between Satluj and Saraswati. And later on, it became a tributary of Saraswati, that is Ganga channel. Then there is flow in Ganga channel, basically. There is flow. When rain comes, the flow, the Ganga channel will flow. Then you have Saraswati. It's the eastern side, that is a Yamuna connection channel. It is today also, it is called Saraswati. It has got flow. The rainwater flow into that Saraswati channel. And then after Ganga, which is reaching up to Vinashana, it is called Hakra channel. Hakra is it also can flow as an independent river, but it is a part of Saraswati. That is from Vinashana up to from Punjab to Sindh. That region there is a Hakra channel, and very close to the southern part of Sindh, there is a Nara channel. So these three channels, 3+1, that is Saraswati channel is a tributary, Ganga is a tributary. Ganga and Saraswati combined together. There is a Hakra channel in Pakistan, and that is in the Punjab region, and Nara channel in Sindh region. These are the 4 parts of Saraswati. It's like a totally broken river. So these 4 parts flow in during rainy season. And some Pakistani people, they use it as a canal, as a water canal, etc. The Nara channel or Hakra channel, etc. They use it as a water channel. And very recently, the Haryana State Development Board and Rajasthan, all these states combinedly, they created borewells along the Saraswati's the drainage, the Saraswati channels, and we are now getting Saraswati water in the borewells. That's very pleasant thing. I was invited to a conference by the Saraswati Development Board of Haryana. So 3 times I went for talking, and my talk was in Kurukshetra University. There they gave me a water bottle of River Saraswati, and
wow,
I was really humbled by that, that water, because I was doing so much of research on the Saraswati from ISRO onwards. That during ISRO time, I got the remote sensing satellite images of Saraswati from ISRO IRS satellites. That is what nudged me into refocus on the ancient history and Rigveda, Rāmāyaṇa, Mahābhārata, etc. Because Saraswati called me from ISRO. As an ISRO scientist, I was working on the launch vehicles, Chandrayaan, etc. That time Saraswati called me, because when I see the IRS maps of River Saraswati, I got a calling. And then I did research on Saraswati, Rigveda, Rāmāyaṇa, Mahābhārata, and I was called into a conference where I am given a water of Saraswati. It was a great moment for me.
Beautiful. Amazing. That is brilliant. Mr. Jijith, with this, we come to the end. End of this particular conversation. Very soon we'll have a detailed conversation on Rāmāyaṇa, and we'll follow it with the Mahābhārata as well. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I loved it. I loved each and every moment